Welcome to the May 23rd Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I start with the roll, please? Trustee Herrera.
Present.
Trustee Levin.
Present.
Trustee Codman.
Present.
Trustee Bazemore.
Present.
And Mayor Garrity.
Present.
Do we have any mayors and trustees announcements?
We do. Are you
Sure.
ready to kick us off?
Sure, I can.
Deputy Mayor?
I can start. So tomorrow night is Oregon Groove Night, because it's Thursday. So come by the Elks Lodge at 7 o'clock. Paul Connors will be there with his B3 organ and John Doty on drums. And a guest third musician will be playing. It starts at 7 o'clock, and you can start your holiday weekend a little early. Also want to remind everybody about the Ossining Jazz Festival, which we're really very excited about. This is going to be the second year that we're doing the festival. And this year we're celebrating women in jazz and blues. And it's going to be a really great couple of evenings. It's the 8th and 9th of June. And there'll be two separate shows, Friday and Saturday night. And then on Sunday, it's going to be a great program up at Bethany. Ingrid Jensen, world-class trumpet player, is going to do a whole workshop with some music students from the school. And so it really is going to be good for everyone, adults and kids and everything. And the Jazz Festival was, the genesis of that came through the Ossining Arts Project, and the village helped to kind of get it going last year, and now it's on its own. So we've had a chance to incubate that, and now it's just going to keep on going. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment, and I'm very excited to hope everybody will join us. You can if you can go to Jazz at the Lodge, which is my new Facebook page. I've rebranded Second Saturday Jazz at the Lodge, just because it's we need to.
Happening too often.
Yes, it's happening more than just the second Saturday, certainly. So anyway, but there's it's ossingjazzfestival.brownpapertickets.com, and you can buy tickets for individual shows or evenings or for the entire series. So encourage you to come and enjoy live music. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else with announcements?
I think I spoke to you about the landlord-tenant.
Yes.
So I could do that, right?
Sure.
With this? Great. So I just wanted to update people on something. Trustee Bazemore and I are in a subcommittee for the Landlord-Tenant Committee. And just wanted to give a little update that it's up and running. And we officially now have 4 complaints in front of this board. And it's really their first official mediation, if you will, although I'm not sure legally that's the right term. 3 are from tenants and 1 is from a landlord group. So looking sort of forward to the fact that this committee that is dealing with housing issues in our community with some new members. They're all new to this board, but I'm excited that things are moving along in that committee. So I thought it would be like a nice update for that group.
And if somebody has a complaint or concern, how can they reach out to the village to be heard?
If they go to the Landlord-Tenant Council page, there is a fillable form.
Right.
And the form can either be dropped off at 16 Croton Avenue, or it can be sent to ltrc@villageofossining.org, and it will then be transmitted to committee chair and co-chair.
Terrific. Thank you. Others with announcements? Trustee Herrera?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So I forgot what year this is, but I believe it's the 39th annual Ossining Village Fair is going to be hitting our downtown on Saturday, June 9th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you want to be a vendor or you want to perform or sponsor, call the chamber, 941-0009. It's usually, I would say, with the exception of the fireworks, the time where we had the most residents and a couple thousand people throughout our downtown. So look forward to that.
Thank you.
I will remind folks that it is, we're looking up to Memorial Day weekend coming up, and thank you very much to the Ossining Central Committee for Veterans. They are organizing the Memorial Day Parade again for us this year. It begins, and I was just checking minutes, is it 9:30 that we step off?
9:30.
At Upper Croton Avenue, goes down Croton Avenue, Main Street, and Spring Street, culminating at Nelson Park, where they have a really lovely ceremony honoring our veterans. So please join us on Memorial Day. They've had a couple of tough years weather-wise, and our fingers crossed that this year will be glorious. I will also remind folks, because the time is coming soon, this information is all on our website. There's way too much text for you to even see if we zoom in, but we are hiring for two really important positions in village government, Director of Planning and Development and a planner position. It's unusual that we can open it up this broadly. There are obviously qualifications for the position, but there is not as rigid a list for us to hire from as is typical for these positions, the list that's usually provided by the county. So to learn more, go to villageofossining.org and go to the personnel page. Okay, great. Open positions. Thank you. Personnel, open positions, and I believe the deadline is June 1st. So we gotta jump right on that. If you are a planner, if you know somebody who's a planner, were you gonna say something?
No, I'm good.
Well, since you just reminded me, I'm really excited about your theme for women in jazz, and I'll just point out to folks that there's 5 women performers, and 3 of them are Ossining residents, and amazingly talented and diverse in their skills and what they bring to the table. I'm very excited about that. Thank you. Also, mark your calendars. It is almost June, which is Pride Month. The Ossining Documentary and Discussion Series, their film this year is called Major. It follows the life and campaigns of Ms. Major Griffin Gracie. She is a 73-year-old black transgender woman. She's been fighting for the rights of trans women of color for over 40 years and has a really remarkable story of fighting for civil rights and doing incredible community outreach. Please join us it's early in the month, earlier than usual, June 7th. So Thursday, June 7th, it starts at 6:30 at the Boudars Theater in the Ossining Public Library. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, could we have a motion to adjourn into executive session for matters of personnel regarding a specific person relating to an appointment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And with that, we will be retiring to another room for a conversation, and then we'll come back out, and if we've come to a decision, then we'll move forward with this first agenda item.
Session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's one resolution for this evening's agenda regarding the Community Development Block Grant Program Representation Resolution. Is there anyone who wishes to speak with regard to that resolution? Okay. Continuing. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining appoints Catherine Michelle Quispy as the village's Community Development Block Grant Program Representative for the period of 2019 to 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board, any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, continuing business of the board. This would be a continuation of our discussion regarding the town's discussion with Michael Conti regarding the shared services proposal, which we've discussed at 2 prior meetings. I just want to bring the board up to date. The village manager and I had a conversation today with Michael Conti, and and we explained to him specifically the village's I guess the best way to say it is desires with regard to proceeding forward, and he was in complete agreement with what the village wants, and what his proposal is as follows. He's going to prepare effectively an addendum or an addendum paragraph to the proposal, which will indicate that when there are issues that do involve village services, personnel, village issues, the village will be involved from the beginning in terms of the discussions that go on, issues that may arise, questions that may be asked. And he will be putting that together. What he will do is, since his contact with regard to the proposal is with the town supervisor, he will forward the revision to the town supervisor, who will in turn then forward it to us. We will review it. It won't require us to be directly a signator to the agreement, but it will specifically provide and acknowledge the village's role, and that the village will be involved in all discussions and determinations that as relate to the village, not anything that is, let's say, related to the unincorporated area. But it was, we really didn't even have to get the words out of our mouth, and Mr. Conti said, I know exactly what you want. I'm in a complete agreement with it and have no problem with that. So hopefully within the next day or so, we will have the revision from Mr. Conti sent to, which he's going to send to the supervisor, and then they'll be able to proceed, but we will, I think, be able to say that, our position is well understood and has been considered by both the town and, more importantly, by Mr. Conti before he does this. He made it very clear that he was not going to go forward with essentially promulgating questions, going about asking questions that involved village services and village individuals without first being in contact with the village. So that's going to be part of his addendum to the agreement, and once I have that, I'll review it with the village manager, and I'll be able to report back to you. But that was subject of our discussion today.
So that means there's nothing for us to sign.
That's correct. So there's really no resolution that's necessary from this board, because, as I said, he is prepared to essentially put into the proposal what it is that we asked him to put in. But it won't require us to be a sign-off, but he will recognize the village's role as, a significant party with regard to any of these shared service discussions.
And so he'll be sending the language to Dana, and Dana will reach out to you, and you will review it and make sure that it reflects our interests, which is that any communication related to going out to village residents, related to village departments, resources, services, personnel, we will not just be reacting to what they plan to send out, we'll actually be involved in providing accurate information and in crafting any questions related to village-related services.
Exactly correct.
Affecting our residents.
Right, villages, services, resources, facilities, anything relative to that. Correct.
That, to me, sounds like it reflects what the board came to a conclusion on last week. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this?
No further comments.
No, I just want to say thank you to Debbie and Stuart for going back and requesting exactly what we discussed last time. And it's great that we will have a say when it comes to any village aspect of the entire project of Phase 1. And I'm glad we had the discussion, because we would have signed a contract last week without having the discussion. So now we see that we don't need to sign a contract, and we can still be part of the project. So thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn the special meeting and to enter into work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right.
All right.
Manager McDonald, you
Thank
look
very
ready to go.
much. So I am very excited this evening because Bill Garrison, our superintendent of Parks and Recreation, is here to share with you an idea for a new platform for registering for parks events, registering for any type of programs that we do, buying your memberships, and he's going to talk about it. He did a lot of research on this and has come up with a recommendation for the board, and we will do a little bit of a demo for you because once you see it, it's really exciting. But I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and this will be exciting.
Yeah, go ahead, you can turn that on. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the online recreation procedures that we have. We have a program called ActiveNet. The village got into a contract with ActiveNet in 2006, and it's been used for the last 12 years. There are a few problems with ActiveNet that I've kind of uncovered since I've been here in my short little tenure. One of the issues is that the big thing when I got here, people were telling me that nobody registers online because it costs 5.8% to use your credit card. And I didn't believe the people when they were telling me this, and it is true. It costs 5.8% to use your credit card to register online. So one of the things that when I looked at some of the information was that in 2017, only 17% of program registration was completed online. So that's a number in today's world that is really, we got to turn that upside down with offering a convenience for our residents. The residents, as I said, were charged 5.8% to use their credit card. The user end of ActiveNet is not friendly. It's difficult to navigate. I've heard complaints from residents and also from the staff. So it's like most people that I haven't found anybody who likes ActiveNet yet. So I started exploring other software opportunities for us and went through quite a few of them. The other thing too is that the ActiveNet is only available in English. So when you go onto the site, it's just in the English language. So this new, this program called Community Pass, it's a software, it's a recreation facility management software. It's web-based. A lot of communities in Westchester County are using that. They have large communities. Miami Parks and Recreation uses Community Pass, so it's all types of sizes of programs. What Community Pass can offer us is a big savings in the expense of the program that we pay annually. So we would cut our expenses, just use about 45% annually and save some money there. The credit card fee, the convenience fee that would be passed on to the residents would be at 2.6, so a more reasonable rate. And the site also has an option to translate into any language, including Spanish, Portuguese, whatever anybody wants to use, which is a nice feature. And that was really kind of I was looking at narrowing it down between two programs, and the other one was based out of Montreal, and they could translate into French, whereas Community Pass could translate into Spanish, so this seemed to be more logical, and that wasn't the only reason. But I just wanted to take you through quickly and show you just what we currently have and how things work and what potentially it would look like with Community Pass. Right now, if you go to the, Right now, if you go onto the website and you get to the Recreation and Parks page, and you wanted to sign up for, let's say a Learn to Swim program, you would have to click 7 times if you clicked in the right spots, which is if you clicked in the right spots, to get to the program, to get it into your shopping cart, to then sign in to buy that program online. So their current brochure goes to a PDF file, which you're probably familiar with. So if I'm looking for a Learn to Swim, I have to go through this whole 28 pages to find my Learn to Swim. And then I would get back, once I would get back to, and eventually I would end up on the ActiveNet. So this is what ActiveNet looks like. So once I clicked 6 times, I would get to this page. And then I can go in here and I can type in Learn to Swim. And it'll bring me, well, it's good looking that way.
It's pretty unforgiving.
Yeah, boy.
Mrs. Stacy doesn't even get you anything.
Yeah, thanks. I couldn't see that from here. So then I would go in here and I could find out what program I wanted and then add it to my cart. Community Pass would offer a different approach, and it would only take 3 clicks to get it into your cart, and a much easier process. So back to the, not gonna let me back in there. Back to the Rec and Parks page, so I would think when you land on this page, over here on the left-hand side, if I was looking for a Learn to Swim program for my kid, I would go to the aquatics program and click on that. If I do that, it takes me to the aquatics page. Still can't register from here. So I can click on here and it goes to the winter program brochure, which is that PDF file which I just showed you. Then I'd have to come back out of here and click on and find where I can go to registration and go through that whole process. So what I'm looking forward to doing is changing the website a little bit. So when you land on here, you would look at the aquatics programs, you would click on that, and what that would do is it would take you to the community page catalog, which now becomes our catalog, and we get rid of that PDF. And we can link it to, it would filter. So if we clicked on aquatics programs, it would just come to all aquatics programs. If we clicked on youth programs, it would come to youth programs. So if this was just filtered, so I clicked on aquatics, there would come up my aquatic programs. I showed the sessions, that's my 2nd click, and I pick which class I want, that's my 3rd click, and it goes into, I sign in for my account. So what's nice about this is that the translation, so if I can pick what language, go into Spanish, everything comes into Spanish, right into even when they go to click into their cart. Oh, it's right there. Yeah, so you can see here, it gives all the information of the program. What's nice about this too is once the resident buys it, they will get an email confirming their transaction. On that transaction, we'll also list the information about the schedule of the courses. There's many other options in here which are nice as far as messaging people. So if this pound class right here is going on, but it's snowing that morning and we need to cancel, the instructor or whoever's in charge of this program can message the people that are just in that program to cancel, to let them know. People when they sign up can also elect to get text messaging as well. So when that message goes out, it will go out as an email and text message to people, which helps with the communication process. The other nice thing about the Community Pass is that we can also put in here not just programs, but if we just want to announce particular events that are going on. So if we could put in something about the village fair. So there's no registration with that, but we can put that into the catalog. And then you could click on that and put whatever type of language you want to put in there. All these programs, when you build the programs, you set up your eligibility, meaning how the ages of people or grades of people. There's the other part of this that's really nice is the facilities calendar. So one of the things that I've noticed here is that if you want to rent a park or a field or anything and Luz is not here, you're in trouble because you're not going to get the information. So we want to make that a little bit easier for folks. So one of the things we can do is we can provide a calendar that's online and people can go and look and pick out the particular facility if they're looking at what's going on in Vets Middle Field in the month of May. You can see, okay, ASO has it starting at 9 o'clock, and they have it from 9 a.m. to 9:30. And that can be done with picnic areas. It can be done with anything, the gym, whatever we've got going on in there. So we could see here, like in the basketball, so we have basketball starting at 10 o'clock, going to 11:30. So this would mean if somebody wanted to do a program at 12 o'clock, right now, the gym looks open at 12 o'clock. We can look at that at a glance. So if somebody calls me up and asks me, I can give them that information, or they could go online and get it themselves. Eventually, there is ways as well as to make the facility rentals online, so they could fill out a form and even pay online as well. So overall, I think the goals of what I like to see with this is this becomes the basis of all the programming and scheduling. Helps you utilize your facilities to see when you have space available, because you can look at a glance and say, okay, I've got this room open on Tuesday night. What can we offer in that room now, and put that out there. The other thing that's really nice about this is that the current system of the recreation programs by season. So it will come out, for example, with the fall program. Once that fall program comes out in that PDF, it's set. What's nice about this is this is an open catalog that you can constantly go back into, add things, change things, whatever you need to do. Let me go back in there. So if I wanted to add a new program today, I could. I could just go on in there, create the program, and then I could send out an email announcing the program with a link to it that would go, so if I was going to open up Lego Engineering, I would send out an email saying, hey, we've got this great program, Lego Engineering for preschoolers. People would click on the link and it would go right to something like this, and people could just sign up with actually one click into it. Over here on the side, there's some filters. So once we figure out what programs we want, like adult programs, fitness programs, youth programs, swim, senior programs, you would be able to filter those. So you go onto this home page right here and you're a senior and you don't want to look at all this other stuff, you would just click senior programs and it would just show you the senior programs. There's also reports that come out which make it easy to follow revenue. easy for looking at for budgeting purposes as far as collecting your revenue and forecasting what programs are bringing in. So it creates a lot of good data. The company's really easy to work with. If we want a certain report and it's not there, they'll help us build it. So it's a lot of positive aspects to this program. Any questions? Yeah, you can turn that off.
Rika, why don't you kick us off with your questions?
Oh, okay. Looks really great. So thank you. Whoa, sorry about that. Sorry, thank you.
Sure.
You've used this company in
I
this
have used
program?
it, yes. I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I saw the upsides. What are the downsides to this, in your opinion?
Well, the downsides is one is we have to retrain the staff. So the transition going from ActiveNet to Community Pass, migrating the data that we have and the accounts over, if that can be done, and that would be part of the startup fee that the company would do for us. So if we can get that up and going, that's going to be that would be a plus, but that could be a rocky road. Getting the staff trained, I think there is training that's part of the startup package. But the other thing that's good is I do know the program. I've worked with it for 3 years. So I'm like the on-site expert that I would be there, and I'd be able to help people out rather than having to get on the phone and call the help desk, which is with there. The other thing too is anytime you change anything that's going to be online, the community's got to get used to it. So it's a different look, it's a different approach, like what's this? I just got used to how to get through and navigate through ActiveNet. So that would be one of the things that we would probably have, people calling up and why is this different, or how do I, kind of educating people how to get through this. I think it's more user-friendly, so I think people will find it easier, and that, if it would be different if we were coming from a program that was similar and didn't have as many problems, and we'd probably have more calls about it. But coming from a program that's very difficult to navigate, I think people will see it as a plus.
So, I mean, this is great. The language issues, everything is great about it. I don't need to repeat what you had already said, and it's light years ahead of where we are. I just have very specific questions. So regarding credit card costs, so you're at
2.6 is what they're
right,
offering.
and somebody did the analysis, because it's not just the cost for this, there are costs all the way from A through Z with the banks and the transfers. They usually come out to more than 2.6. They usually come out to about 3.5 if you do the correct. So we don't want money falling to the side because it wasn't looked at from point A to point Z. So I would just suggest you do it. As far as the cost of this whole platform, what are we looking at?
So the startup cost is around $7,500, and then annually it's about $7,500. Currently with ActiveNet in 2017, we paid nearly $19,000. And additionally, they took another $7,000 or $8,000 from our residents and convenience fees.
What did we pay a year for what we currently have? Not the total. We're not paying $17,000 a year,
18 to 19,000.
per year.
And that includes the fees?
No.
No.
And so the village pays.
So
The
total
fees
of
are to the
Users pay
consumer.
on top of that.
they collected
Yeah, I
from
guess, right.
Osnine, from us, from the
Right.
village, and from residents about $25,000.
Okay, so it looks to me like even in year one, so one of the challenges in these is uploading new information and doing correctly, because when you do something new, so I assume they have a sandbox and you do it there and then you move it over. The issue is that I think it's worth paying someone to do all the loading up. It is where all the mistakes are made, and not to say somebody shouldn't sit with them and learn at the same time, but it would be a shame to have such huge, there's just a lot of problems, and you always need a runner to say, hey, I could do this piece now that I'm getting better at it, especially for people who don't normally use it. So what happens to the catalog? It can't stay this huge catalog if you're going online catalog, right? There's got to be some point of you calculated, you're still going to have the paper, all that.
No, so the
PDF and all that.
catalog essentially becomes like when you do online shopping. So you would go there, and if you wanted to scroll down and look at the entire catalog, you could, or you could just use the filter and click what you're looking for. So basically, it's the same as the PDF. You open up the PDF, and you're just looking for aquatic programs. You would just turn the pages till you got to the aquatic section, and then look at those programs.
But the
So-
catalog's going to be really an online.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, so
Right.
there should be some savings, maybe not in year one.
How many catalogs do we print currently? Because we know it's mostly just online now. How many? Three pieces of,
But we
three
don't print.
sets of paper?
They're not printed.
No, I know, but
How many do you
do people
produce?
ever request a printed copy? How
Yes.
often does that happen? Are we talking about like a half a dozen
People
or
do,
like?
and people will continue to do that because there is something to be said about having something in hand to look at. There's other ways of doing that, promoting the particular programs by creating flyers, putting information all together on one, so you don't have this 28-page packet
Yeah.
that you need to print for people, which, you know, if they're just looking for one particular program, pointing people in the right direction. So, you know, we'd still have that option for, you know, some hard copy type of material to give to people, but that would probably be one thing that people would have to start getting used to, because we keep referring them, okay, we're going, you know, look online, oh, I don't want to, or I don't have access, okay, then here we can give you some hard copy.
So, iPhones. This is all responsive themes. It's all going, how does it look on the iPhone? Totally usable?
Yeah, it has a mobile version,
Okay.
so a view on that, so it works.
All included, the whole thing? Okay. And does the fee include when they upgrade their platform? Because we've had that problem that we're included in any upgrades, or is that like a separate contractual
It's
fee?
included. So the price that we're getting right now is for 10,000 transactions a year, which we would be under. So if we got larger, then it would be a bump in there because we would go to the next level as far as transactions. But any type of upgrades that they do, if they integrate a new component or make a fix into the system, that's totally included. Where there are things that we can add on to, like if we wanted to do kind of the online permit for facilities, that's an additional fee. But that's down the road that we can take a look at it. You know, I think when I looked at it one time, it was about $1,500 extra to do that. So got to kind of weigh the costs of how much you're taking in revenue and if it's worth it.
So the language piece is phenomenal. I don't know if it also, when you click it, print out a page or two in that language that you're asking. That's usually not something that can be done, but if this does it, I don't know. That would be great. And it looks like you have room for about 7 tabs. They're only using 2. So I might suggest that one of the things we talked about in the Parks and Rec is that people all think they know what everybody wants and needs. I tend to think people look in the mirror and have a conversation and think that represents what everybody wants and needs. It would be great to have something that says, what would you like to see at the community center as far as like different classes? So that some sort of, you either create a blog, I'm sure you have space, I just don't know if it's included. On a community center piece like that would be phenomenal, like, hey, thanks for the swim, but I'd like to start at 5 in the morning, or whatever, I don't know. I don't know if it has that capability, it's just
The
something I'm
Community
asking.
Pass doesn't, but we certainly can do, on the website, we can.
Oh, I see, so you would go, okay.
Yeah,
not
so
all
everything
these-
would be, everything would be right there from that web page. That's where everything would start from.
Okay.
And then just for that registration, it would go into Community Pass. But we could have something on there about, you know, program suggestions, you know, let us know what you want, what you'd like to see, things like that.
But you do have room for promotions, like the fair's happening, and you have room and they don't charge you for free events, or even, because
Yeah.
it's all percentage, so if it's a free event, and I want to go to the free event, that would be a 0 cost.
It's-
Do they still, do
Yeah,
they
it's not a
charge you fee?
percentage, it's a flat fee that we pay.
Okay.
So if we wanted to put 50,000 things in there, we could. It's not, or 4, it's gonna be the same price for us. And if we do $500,000 in revenue or $1 million in revenue, it's still the same price for us.
Great.
As long as we stay under the 10,000.
10,000 transactions. And the transactions, if I go online and I sign my 3 kids up for swimming, that's 1 transaction. It's not
But if you
3.
signed your 3 kids up 3 different times, it's 3 transactions.
Right.
And if you look up information, is that a transaction or not? Just looking up information, until you get to the
no.
point of the,
No. No.
this is great.
And the other thing, just to, I should have said, is that this is not going to change any of the current way of doing the in-person registration. So this doesn't take away from anybody who wants to come in and continue to come across the counter and pay the way that they have paid always. And we also, with this, is we currently don't take credit cards at the counter, but we would be able to take credit cards at the counter. And also, as of September 1st, e-check will be accepted as well through Community Pass, which a lot of people are starting to use more and more.
My questions.
There is. But usually the fee is like $1.50.
Now, did you say it's web-enabled? So if you do it on a phone, you'd go through just a phone browser, like a Chrome or something
Or
like that?
Safari, right?
So there isn't an app that they
Nope.
download? It's just all...
No, it's all web-based.
So I like the finance part. The fact that obviously it's taking in all this data and having that transactional data and attendance data and all that other stuff. That'll really help you to drive metrics around what's going on with the programs you're doing. So I think that's a great, aside from all the other things that you mentioned, I like that part.
Another good aspect is some of the program, one of the things they do is called a season statistics report. So you could click on that on a daily basis. So if you know that the registration is coming to an end in a certain program, and you need 5 people in order for that program to run, and there's 3 there, that's when you would then put out an email blast to try to get 2 more people to get that program running. Right now, we don't have that capability. We just kind of like, oh, program ended. How many people are in this program? Oh, 3. We're not going to run the class. So it would help in that aspect.
No questions.
Yeah, this is I'm good, right? This is great. So I used to work 5 out of 12 months or 4 years at the rec department, and I still cringe at ActiveNet because we had to develop the program and the curriculum and the staffing and the hiring and the interviewing, and it's we're always talking about, at least the past couple of months and even the last couple of years, of whatever we can do to make it user-friendly for our residents, to get part of programming, or you actually jump to it, but the aspect where they could actually now, later on in the program, after we get acquainted, they could reserve rooms and parks. Right now, even though they do a great job, if you want to park, you got to do the paper form, and it got to be copied, then you have to do this, then you have to get a carbon copy of this, and so in our effort to be more efficient and user-friendly and green, this is definitely a good step forward. I love the fact that running the program and the platform is, you said 45% cheaper than what we currently pay. The credit card fees are almost half of what we pay. Now, more than half our population that does not speak English can actually use the website with a translator option like we have on our website now in the village. So that's all a win-win-win. I really appreciate that you're doing this now. I know that you're still in a transition mode, but this is going to be, this I feel is going to be a game changer for how they operate when it comes to programming at the rec center, for parents and guardians and people who just want to use. From what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, more people are using our rec center and our programming. So this is good. Thank you.
I think everything about it is terrific. I'm somebody who does use ActiveNet for convenience sometimes, and I cringe at the fees that we pay. But I can't tell you how happy I am about everything that you said. And the staff learning to transition to it, I can't imagine that, within a season, I think they too will be very pleased, because I can't imagine ActiveNet, like you said, they find it very difficult to work with as much as those of us. So the concern that the folks in the public will need a transition time, that's not, you can take that off the list of potential problems. It's terrible. Great. I guess then my question is, it looks like you're ready to go with this. When should the public expect that they no longer have to deal with ActiveNet? I know you've always got the next season up and ready to go. Are you going to be able to have this ready for what would be the next fall sign-up season, or is this going to be more like a next spring?
So we're working out the details of our contract with ActiveNet and seeing how, because we have a contract with them through October. So in the contract, we're looking to see if there's a buyout that's possible and trying to get what that would cost, and then looking at the cost of what it would to implement to see if it's a reasonable thing that we could do now. If that works, then what we'd like to do is start with Community Pass right around July 1st, spend the month of July training the staff, building the program so that in mid-August, the fall schedule would be up and ready, and we would open registration for fall with Community Pass.
And that's a reasonable timeline if you can make the numbers work with
I believe
ActiveNet?
so. I believe it is. The one good thing, again, about that is, as long as, we get the majority of our programs in, we can continue to add them at any point along. So even if we're not ready with something, we can put that in a week later, and we're good to go.
Well, I'm sure Debbie will keep us informed operationally of how things are moving forward, and just as you have information for the public, if we can give them a heads up that there's this super new, exciting way to register for things, you should check it out online, since most people are not registering online. As soon as we know that's the case, or anybody who happens to be watching our meeting, if they're gonna be slightly disappointed for fall programming, and then we can let them know it'll be happening in the new year. Okay, great.
Do you need anybody else for the summer camps?
I think we're good with counselors. We do have some openings in the younger, the K and pre-K camp, but the vets camp is full, Ryder is full, and Claremont has some spots available.
Great.
So the registration has been good for camp.
Well, I
Yes.
just want to say thank you for all your work in looking at these different programs, because I know how excited the board would be when they saw this. And you really did a great job, because it's all the things that they were really hoping that we would change.
Great,
And so thank you so much. For
good,
your work
thank
on
you.
that.
Yeah, Debbie, that was pretty smart to invite Bill in for his first presentation to the board to be something that everybody's gonna be happy
Yes.
about. That was pretty great.
That's not the way it always
warned him
works.
about that.
That's just business as usual in the village. Welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's-
Expect this all the time.
Not a problem.
That's right. We're just
Great.
patting it, getting ready for budget season.
Well, this is great, because this is also feeding our bigger goal of being more user-friendly, being more accessible, to be able, for the public to be able to get the information they need and interact with the village in a way that is not cumbersome. And so I'm just very, very happy on every level. Thanks.
No, it's a contract.
Not until I think we need to see something from them first, but I can,
Right, okay.
and then we can certainly put that together.
Right. So at some point, this will be on the agenda, legislative agenda for your approval.
Sounds good.
Thank
Hopefully
you for
sooner
being
rather than
excited
later.
about it. I was pretty excited too. So. Great, all right. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bill.
Bill.
So we have more good news, lots of good news from Joe Agostinelli. And Sonia is here.
Ah. So,
Come on up.
How's it
Have a
going, Joe?
seat. Oh, you got goodies.
oh,
Oh my God, paper.
We can get iPads.
Don't need
We could lease them.
have you been here talking to Debbie?
Municipalities.
Because Debbie's got all kinds of more technology suggestions.
Seriously.
Yes,
It's really good.
yes. So, I've been working with Joe, Stuart's been working with Joe, and we're so happy to have Sonia with us. To also, do you want to come up to the table?
Yes, please.
That would be great.
We're out of mics.
Well, she can pull it next to
We
Joe.
can
Well, I could
share.
share. I could share my
Yeah, we-
microphone.
We're totally capable of doing that. Thank
pull up
you.
the
share.
Trustee Herrera.
Like a congressional hearing, let them both, sit there.
Oh. We could let them up to the big table, but okay.
Never thought I'd see the day.
Yeah.
Hate these tables, but.
So just to give you a little.
This is great.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening. Welcome.
Just the information is, rather than me starting to give out a whole bunch of numbers of what we've done for the year, some of those are just basically some information on the amount of permits, plan reviews,
violations that I figured on your own time, maybe want to just kind of go through them, but I figured it would kind of bore everybody just reading numbers, so I decided just to give everybody a copy.
Interesting.
And the other forms that are there are just, they're rough drafts of some type of brochures that we're trying to do in 2 languages to give some information to the public on like code enforcement, some things about general safety, home responsibilities of property owners to, maintenance and sanitation, fire safety rules. And the other brochure on building department stuff is just information like typical things that you would need permits for to apply, and information about how to go about applying for a permit, about, what requires to have architectural plans, insurance information, and things of that sort. It's kind of a rough draft. It's not perfect yet. We're still working on fixing some of the little things that are missing in there, but I thought it would be a good idea just to give the board an idea of what we're trying to do to promote some more information to the public. And these would be information and brochures that we were planning on putting on the website and maybe at the counters of the village departments that anybody can come in and just pick up, and maybe some of the information that's in there may answer the question that they, I thought they may want to ask by just reading the brochure. So that's just the general paper information that I gave you.
And this will also be available online?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So some of the other things that I guess that just to bring the board up to speed on some of the things we started this year was obviously we started the idea with sanitation tickets. So previously, we'd have to give out violations by doing orders to remedy, which gives a homeowner an allotted amount of time to remedy a situation. It became ineffective because by the time you viewed it, wrote it, sent it out, and the allotted time would pass, sanitation would eventually just pick it up because it was unsightly, and the property owner never really got any type of violation for it. And we would do this again next week and next month, and it would continue. So with the sanitation tickets, it allows us to go out and just give the ticket to the property owner, post it on their door, and they were hit with a fine for, say, $100. And these would be things for like putting construction waste in the garbage, that way you would pick up kitchen waste, or garbage out on the wrong day, or, you know, they have bulk day and it's, you know, an excessive amount of garbage. We get the calls in from the sanitation foreman, and then we send someone out and they'll issue the summons. And if the property owner obviously gets it once or twice, the hope would be that they would learn a lesson, that they're being hit with a $100 or $300 fine, and eventually comply. And the hope is that down the road in the future, that, you know, this would actually get better, and there actually would be less sanitation tickets issued because more people would just be in compliance. The other thing we started was, starting this year, if a contractor or an electrician or a plumber gets caught doing any work when they haven't taken a permit, when they have to come in to file the permit, they get hit with either 3 times the permit fee or a $1,000 fine, whichever is greater. So if the permit that they were to take out turned out that their permit fee would have been $1,200, if it was $300, and it was $400 or 3 times the fee and it was $1,200, they pay $1,200. If their fee would have been, if they came in originally $100 permit fee, they get charged a $1,000 fine. And that would be to promote the fact of having contractors and electricians, plumbers to actually come in and file and not start work without getting their proper permits. And there's been people who have been getting some of these fines recently. I mean, they obviously are not happy with it, but they've learned the next time that you need to pull your permits. So that we started this year. We also we hired a 3rd code enforcement officer, which he's been here for about a month or so. And this is to actually enhance us to be able to, you know, continue doing the sanitation tickets, start doing fire inspections to properties that the state requires us to do on whether it's residential, we're supposed to do them every 3 years, or if it's commercial businesses that require them every year. For a long period of time, we haven't been able to do all the businesses because we actually ran a number of about how many require fire inspections. We came up with more than 1,500. So to be able to do all of these on a timely basis, the way we're supposed to do them for the state, we added more enforcement with the hope that we can come up with a plan to map out the areas that we want to start doing, so that when we get to the 3-year turnaround, everybody has gotten their fire inspections in. So that we also, with the thing with the foils and searches, since we've been able to upload everything, it's gone much, much better. What used to take foils and searches, where people were, realtors and all were complaining weren't getting them quick enough, and now being turned over in less than 2 days. So that's really been helpful. And actually, you can go online with Municity Connect, and they can actually see the property information right from your computer at home, and you can see if there's any, on a particular property, if there's any open permits, any violations, so they can deal with them directly when they see them, and either just call and maybe try to get those things closed out before the closing.
In the future, what we're working on to hope for is where we have every certificate of occupancy, building permit, sometimes when we have surveys, we have them scanned in a Laserfiche. But what we're working on doing is where from home, you could actually access that and print it. So if a title search company, if a realtor needs the copies of those certificate of occupancies, they can do them right from their own computer. They don't even have to come in. That's what we're working on in the near future to happen. Some of the other things that we were doing is, I guess, the goals that we're trying to do for code enforcement, like what you see with brochures and stuff, is trying to promote more information to the public for tenants, for example, that they can have various different ways to file their complaints, that they can remain anonymous, they don't have to give they have various different ways they can do so. They can call, or they can actually, on our website, you can put in your complaint or your question on the website, and it goes through on an email, and it actually comes directly to me. So I'm able to answer their questions at any time of the day. And sometimes I'll answer somebody's question, whether it's at night, Saturday, Sunday. But I give out the information, whether they want to know about what they need to do to file a permit, or if they're filing a complaint. I'm able to enter it into the computer immediately, so then the next day I can have someone go out and look at the complaint that they're filing. So we've worked on that. That's actually working out really well because you know, a lot of people have answered back and said that they're kind of surprised. You know, I didn't expect to get my answer from you immediately, and they thought maybe it would be during working hours, but they would get it and be on a Saturday or Sunday and so forth. So I've gotten a lot of good feedback about that. And also what we're working on, we're still looking to fill the position for the assistant building inspector. We interviewed someone recently that seemed to be a good candidate. We're just hoping that maybe he'd be interested in taking this job. And if that's the case, obviously it would help us a lot in being able to service the public better, because right now I have to do, you know, review plans, do inspections, so I have alternate days when we go out to do inspections. But if we're able to add someone on, then we can actually, you know, do inspections on a daily basis like we used to do. We'll be able to get permits out a lot faster. So I'm hopeful for that to be filled soon. But those are just some of the things that I bring you up to speed on what we're trying to do going forward. And as for code enforcement, we've talked about various different ways on how we want to do code enforcement. We talked about maybe assigning code enforcement officers to zones where they're responsible to handle specific areas. So any complaints, any issues is really their area to handle. You know, we continue basically to try to enforce, you know, with overcrowding issues is very serious. So we are taking those seriously, and every time we get complaints on that, we work to, you know, to get those things in compliance. Do you have others to add about the enforcement, or?
I think with respect to the court process.
Well, otherwise he doesn't get you on the.
Oh, sorry. With respect to the court process, I think that the process moves faster now from the first appearance up to the point of compliance. I think that's a result of probably, in my opinion, clearer OTRs that are more succinct and very specific to what the facts and circumstances are related to the violation. I've actually, you know, from my personal attempts of encouraging defendants and the court to have shorter adjournments, because of course when these things come in, you know, if there's extensive work that has to be done, sometimes there's a longer time frame that's anticipated to get the property into compliance. But to keep still with an effort to keep the time frame more brief. So instead of, as an example, adjourning it out 9 weeks, which is what we think may take to get compliance, we'll still just adjourn it for 3 weeks to have a checkpoint to see how they're doing and what the progress is. What else?
I mean, some of the processes now when somebody has to remedy a situation that
includes having to submit an application or a permit, I actually try to review those and put those ahead of other ones. I mean, not that I'm trying to put behind somebody else who's just doing, an addition or deck, but we focus on getting those done. So if part of the compliance means they have to go in front of a zoning board or planning board, that this way we can get them on the path of getting to compliance quicker. So that actually helps to move the violations a lot further.
I should, for folks following at home, if you're not actually reading an agenda, I just want to make sure everybody knows who our guests are this evening. We said Joe Agostinelli is our building inspector, and Sonia Tanksley, you're a face that not so many people know, and you're just the nicest person we never want to have to see, because you're a prosecutor, and so thank you for being here to share some of your insights on what you're experiencing in the courts, and we're pleased that you joined us just the first of this year, although it's not your first stint with the village, so welcome back.
Thank you.
Sonia is also, when we set up the landlord-tenant committee, she is the attorney, I would say, on staff, I guess. I don't know what the official
Way to
title
describe it.
is.
Good way.
To help in so many ways, because they're just residents. They don't have legal, well, most of them don't have legal background. So Sonia's been at the meetings, and that's a part of setting up that committee, is a part of the charter that we always
And
talked
I
about.
think the committee, Rika, you've been in, and you've been at the meetings too. I think the committee really, although it's still in its infancy, is really moving along nicely, creating the template for the complaint form, or questionnaire form, as you will. There's already several complaints that have come in, and the committee seems to have gelled with respect to having a process regarding the review and how they'll deal with it. Some important questions and important issues have come up with respect to doing things more proactively in the community on behalf of landlords and tenants. So I think it's moving along very well.
Questions about anything that was brought to us by Mr. Agostinelli or Ms. Tanksley?
I was just going to say, I think it's, one step at a time, it's the building department and code enforcement is something that's needed some tender loving care, as it were, and some real focus, and all the hard work that you've been doing is paying off. And thank you for that. Thank you for your efforts.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I'm not used to getting these types of dashboards and reports and explanations and outreach from this particular department in years. So this is very exciting. I mean, how you're breaking it down and how you have a timeline, how you have a vision. It's something that this board and previous boards have been saying and preaching, and I'm glad that we're getting somewhere. Even though a lot of residents may not see it, but there is a lot of work that has been going on, and this is, a testament to that. This is great. I'm glad that between Bill Garrison and yourself, we're acting like people who speak Spanish actually live here for the first time in Ossining. So it's great to have, brochures in Spanish, since we have a huge population that speaks Spanish in Ossining. So thank you for that.
Great work.
Thank you.
How are you distributing these, please?
We're gonna put those online. We're actually gonna continue to put more information.
Okay.
Doing more, not maybe in pamphlets, but stuff that we can put online.
Move the mic a little.
Oh,
He doesn't, yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
But
How are we
we're gonna
distributing?
do is, obviously, those will be also on the counter. We're gonna put them into all the departments. Maybe we can, yeah, we can put them at the village fair. We can have a way we can distribute them out at the community center. Any events that we can do to continue to give them out. Because I think the biggest important thing is, a lot of people are not aware of what types of things are considered, safety hazards. I think the biggest important thing to get everybody into, safer housing and living is really education. So the more information we can give them and to tell them, what their rights are and what they should be getting as proper housing, it only would, I think it's just beneficial and all for the entire thing. And hopefully, the enforcement becomes less needed once people start to understand what's considered a dangerous situation. And, you know, like I've had some conversation with a lot of the community, the Hispanic community, that sometimes they don't file a complaint that they haven't accept living conditions just because they think that, you know, they have to leave their name, or, you know, it's gonna mean that the landlord or the neighbor is gonna get into you know, have a problem or a dispute with them. And, you know, I encourage them to tell them that, you know, you pay a certain amount of money for rent and you deserve at least decent housing, so you shouldn't ever accept substandard. Don't be afraid to let us know if they're not getting proper heat or whatever, because ultimately, you know, the landlord is responsible to offer that. So, you know, we stay on top of it to get the housing conditions in a lot better than they have been. So I
if
think it's
you-
education to give more than anything.
If I can suggest for, especially the code enforcement, is ask the churches if they will also put it on their boards or in their little, I mean, we have a lot of, obviously the library, the community center here. I suggest in the future you actually put a date on here, because if you plan to update them, it's gonna start costing our
Okay.
fortune to do this in paper. I think it's great. This, I understand, is a draft. So, I don't know if you guys are planning, like, when you're, a work in progress, not a draft, excuse me. I don't know if you're planning every time you present, I guess quarterly, to bring this in and update us, like this is your Bible and you're just gonna keep adding, or, it's hard for me to understand the columns and
yeah.
what I'm supposed to be looking at, and I'm not planning to read it all now, but it's easy to read, not so easy to understand, so.
Right, we've been working with the, with Municity, to actually generate better reports, so they're, very easy to understand and understand what they are. They've gotten better with them, but, we have to just work with the, programmer to get them a lot better.
I mean, I think this is great, don't get me wrong, and it's better than what we used to get, there's just no, but, you know, it's like every time you raise the bar, so, just in a way that somebody can look at this and understand what it is you're looking at. I mean, you've got an index in the back, I mean, it's all great, but, so, I think this is fantastic, as Omar has said, I just, it's hard, once you start putting things on the websites, people expect to be able to understand it, so that's what starts happening, expectations just go really high, but it's fantastic.
Is this on the website, or is this just being provided to us?
No, they're just, reports that we can print off of
Oh,
our
okay.
computer to
I'm
show
sorry,
you.
I thought this was
We
actually-
give them to you just to basically,
Okay.
see, you know, the volume of stuff that we're working on.
This is like your internal, like your
Yeah.
daily.
Yeah,
Okay.
reports. Oh,
So
thanks for
the
clarifying that.
intent here ultimately would be to take this data and put it in those pretty little pie charts, which we actually put online.
Right.
So that it is
Oh, I
really
see.
easy to
Great.
understand where most of the complaints are coming from, and we would dissect this, because you'll see some of these pages as you go through it, it just says type of complaint and how many. So once we can start tracking that, I recently went to a city manager's conference, and the vendor was there, and we talked a lot about the reports, the challenges that we have creating the reports that we want, and he said he would be happy to reach out to us and help us learn the functionality and take care of some of the challenges that we've had with the program. So I'm pretty excited about that. And there is one other really good piece of news here that Joe didn't share. So they are all getting iPads, and they are going to be able to go and take them in the field and be able to sit in front of a home or a property and access the information that they need, so they can take pictures right there, upload them, put all their notes in it, and it will save them so much time, because now they don't have to write it down, go back to the office, hope not to lose it, then remember what the scribble means here, you know, it's gonna be so nice. And I wanna thank Jamie and Craig, they got together to order the equipment. It's actually sitting in Jamie's office, so congratulations, pretty soon they'll be up and running, and I just think that's a really great thing to provide to them, the tools to make them more efficient, so.
So I have one more question. I mean, honestly, this is great, so I don't want my questions to make it seem like it's not great stuff that you're reporting. 1,500, when you looked at the inspections, 1,500 commercial,
Yeah,
Could you
well,
just tell me what that means, actually?
so we ran a report on, by property class, on which property classes require fire inspections. And other than single-family and two-family on vacant land, everything else is required for fire inspection because it's either a multifamily or it's a commercial use. Some of the 1,500 are, you know, for example, if you were doing a townhouse complex or a condominium complex and they're individually owned, it's gonna come up with, say, you know, the 40 or 50 that are in that unit, but we do have to inspect each one. So when you see 1,500, it may not be 1,500 properties, but it's about 1,500 buildings.
Units. Units, because they're, okay. Sounded like a very big number for a little village, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, you know, if you think of some of the properties like Hudson Point, you know, we have some like Broadcliff Woods. They would fall into those inspections because they're considered multifamily. So we have to coordinate with, say, like the management company. We just, you know, hey, we're going to be doing a certain amount of them. You need to tell the, you know, the residents there that we're going to be there on a certain day, and then we have to team to inspect these. Or like if we're doing a building like, you know, Harbor Square. Harbor Square is 180, 90 units. That's something that has to be coordinated through management. We just wouldn't walk into people's homes, but we'd have to inspect each apartment.
Okay, so it's a working session, not legislative, so might I suggest, Sonia, I don't know if you updated, but in the landlord-tenant committee, right, we talked about inspections, registrations, so this is great, but you guys need to coordinate it because it changes the cost that we looked at based on this discussion. Because if you're doing this type of inspection, it won't be required to do inspections based on what we recommended for the landlord. Am I wrong? or-
Yes, but do know that like places like Harbor Square and any of the new multifamily units that have been built in the last 10 years, we weren't
We
actually.
weren't looking at
we weren't
5
look-
years, actually. We talked about anything built in the last 5 years. And we can change it to 10.
yeah, I think it was like 5 or 10 years. But if it's new construction,
Right, we don't need
there's no need of doing an inspection.
But still, this should be coordinated, because we might have
Yes.
some savings if, let's call it 500 units don't need to be because the inspections are being done. And that's gonna change a price tag, no matter what we're talking about. So I would just ask that it be coordinated with one of those recommendations, so it doesn't fall through the cracks. Thank you.
Further questions? Yes. You seem.
Just leaning back in my up and chair.
Doing clerk.
I'm glad you asked that question, Trustee Levin, because I think one of the big questions that we get asked about related to code enforcement and building departments, and you touched on it, was overcrowded housing. And for folks at home, let me just like to clarify, when you're talking about the buildings that are due for triannual fire inspections, that's anything with 3 units or more.
Yes.
And it's the single and two-family homes that if there appears to be overcrowding, it's a little more challenging to get into those homes because they're not due for a triannual fire inspection. And so, since the two of you are here, whoever wants to field this question, what is a pathway to be able to access those homes? And for people at home, when they say, there's satellite dishes everywhere, there's how much garbage comes out on Tuesday morning, like it seems to a neighbor that clearly there must be overcrowding here, but if it's a single or two-family home, can you help folks in the community understand either how they can report things to you that might allow for an inspection if there might really be a cause for concern in a property, and then why sometimes you can't get in even if it seems like common sense that you should be looking inside?
Okay. Right. I mean, obviously, we can, when we get a complaint, we always will go out and investigate it, but the owner always has the right to whether or not they choose to let us in. So we can access to the front door, and if we explain to them, we're from the building department, we received the complaint, and sometimes they will tell us, no, well, the complaint, it's not valid, and we tell them, well, if we can come on in and visualize that, then we can clear that there is no overcrowding here. And in the cases when they don't want to let us in, what we've been trained by state law is that we have to walk off the property. We can't continue on. But in some cases, the complaint comes from the tenant. A tenant will tell us, they're leaving, and now they want to tell us I'm living in an apartment that they knew was not legal or was constructed because they've had a dispute with the landlord, and we have the right to access that apartment because the tenant has the right to allow us entry there. And if we don't have a record that that apartment, say a basement was supposed to be a recreation room and now it's a full-fledged apartment, we've gained access through the tenant. That's one way. Another way we can get in is if the fire department is called out, the police department are called out to for an emergency of some sort, and they see visualize something that doesn't appear to be a proper apartment, they can contact us immediately, and that would be any time of the day, Saturday, Sunday, holidays, 24 hours a day, and one of us will go out, and that allows us to gain access to visualize it. If we started looking into things like we get complaints from Department of Public Works where they'll tell us there's an excessive amount of garbage, the water usage has changed where in a single-family home they have a certain normal water usage and this one is 3 or 4 times the amount. We can gather that information and bring it to our prosecutor and our corporation counsel to see if that's enough information, evidence based on the complaints and what we're getting from information from the Department of Public Works to request that maybe we could take it to court and the judge would issue a warrant. And if we can get access for a search warrant, then we can, we'd have the authority to go in and search to see what's going on with this particular property. But we have to get that evidence together, and hopefully all of them correlated together will give enough evidence for a judge to do a search warrant.
And then just to clarify, when you talk about things that your department will visualize, when we say overcrowded housing, overcrowding just tends to then encourage violations, whether it's a lack of egress because people are living in spaces that weren't really designed for people to be living in, or more people might mean that there's more electrical extensions or electrical work that's substandard. And these are things that are really safety concerns.
Yes.
And so that's when you sometimes find yourself forced to make really difficult decisions about just determining if a house is uninhabitable, if there's serious safety concerns.
Right. If there's serious safety concerns, that could be something of a danger to the residents, then we'd have to make a decision to say that this particular house is not habitable. And if that's the case, I mean, yeah, the families would be taken out of the home. We don't leave people stranded. We have some, if they have a place they can go with family in the meantime, they'll indicate to us and we'll make sure that they're doing so. And they could always call us and tell us, I've only taken a few things and I'd like to come back into the house to get them, and we'll accommodate that. If they don't, we have contact with the county services that can put them up with some temporary housing until they can, find, another place where it is safe in a place for them to live. But we do know, obviously, that when those situations have happened, that people are displaced, and we understand that. But it's a way of deciding: do we want to get them out of a dangerous situation? We don't want to leave them in something where, especially if the department has now visualized it. It's our responsibility to react and take them out of a dangerous situation and get them into better housing, which actually goes back to the point of the education. So to educate tenants to realize that when you're going to be renting an apartment, it's probably a good idea to maybe they have the option to maybe check with us or formulate a way to make sure that what they're renting is a proper legal apartment before they committed to renting there. They always have the ability to call, and we could always look up that information. If they are getting something that, if they rent something and they believe that the landlord's not providing the proper safety measures for them, that's why we encourage them to call us to let us know if we can react on getting that corrected immediately. so that they're not in a situation where it's become so bad that we have to react to remove them.
Trustee Guerrero, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Overcrowded housing has been a concern and still a very much a reality in Ossining. And I'm glad that you explained the process and also the procurement and legal standards that your department has to abide by and why we just can't go into a home. I do want to clarify, though, that the procedure that the village has been using has been that for the past, I could say, more than 10 years. Nothing is new about that process. And also, my understanding is that the fire department, emergency services, on a regular basis, they also report if they see something that's suspicious or out of whack on their own. So that's a kudos and a thank you to them. I guess, and not tonight, but just to share it, our continued challenge is how to address the issue in a more effective way. Because like right now, we're doing what we've always done. We're just now explaining how we're doing it, which is great. But the strategy and the procedure hasn't changed. And obviously, our hands are tied when it comes to actually following, county and state law, accessing property, and such. So, I guess that's been our challenge is when we get the calls. I mean, what I got from that was, do we encourage our residents to, should we turn to them to start reporting that they live in unsafe conditions, right? Obviously, since the owners won't, or do we start using PR to our advantage and publicize all the property owners that are just paying fines instead of fixing their issues? Talk about it. Or I'm just thinking actual strategy. This is more for this board when it comes to what we can do. I'm not talking at you. I'm just thinking out loud. But I just wanted to share that.
So I have a question.
Can I just respond to one thing that was said, because I think, and Sonia, you may also. Yes. We don't just have people pay fines to avoid making repairs. They make the repairs and they pay fines. So we never have a circumstance where a person simply says, I'm going to pay my $500 and I'm going to leave the place in squalor. We make it very clear they've got to repair. What we may do, in fact, is lower the fine if, in fact, the cost of the repair is so excessive. But they don't just pay a fine and essentially, and if they're a repeat offender, it's made very clear to the court, these folks have been here before. And so I just wanted to be clear that we don't have a circumstance where they just pay a fine and the repairs, we make sure, that's one of the reasons why we keep it on a much tighter leash with the court, so that we can get these folks to actually come back in and tell us they've hired an architect, they've hired a design person, so we can go through, because we want to make sure that that's been done. That's also why we've now increased it to $1,000, because you're now seeing contractors coming in going, I better do that because, I can't pass that cost to my client. We had someone who actually said, well, I guess the client's going to be, upset with this. Not the client's fault. You should have gotten your electrical permit. What I can tell you is I get a great number of calls from people about overcrowding. And they go to Joe, and I have a couple right now, we can't get into the house. Simple as that. There's no one who will let us into the place. Tenants may be fearful of letting us in. We just can't get in. We will check to see what the water levels are to see if, in fact, there's a larger than otherwise use. But we're just not allowed to get into the place. We can see things around. Garbage tickets, as Sonia has explained, are actually easier because you can see that. So we can write those tickets. And I should say, we've had great success with those tickets. I mean, those people come in, they pay. We've had multiple people who've had multiple violations, and they pay the multiple violations. But those are getting, dealt with. It's adding to the court's calendar, but what's happening is you're getting people who are starting to realize, if I leave the garbage out, and one of the problems with that these particularly entities that are corporations that own buildings, you can't appear in court by your manager. You have to appear by an attorney. So the local attorneys are doing well off of this because they're the ones who are going to come in and basically take care of that. But So those entities, those buildings here that are owned by an LLC or a corporation or something like that, they have to show up in court with an attorney, and if they don't, even if the manager comes in and says, I'm pleading guilty, the judge will not accept the plea. They're told they have to come back the next week or 2 weeks with an attorney, which is an added expense, which is another reason why you're seeing those tickets, which is what we thought would happen, is that they're actually going to start to get more compliance from that. But I just want to correct it, that they don't just pay and not repair. We make sure that they get the repairs, and that's why we get the building department involved as well.
Thank you for that. But that's but that's now. That's now because you and Joe. But in the past, I know it was not the case. But thank you.
And to add more specificity to what Stuart mentioned, we don't even discuss fines until there's full compliance. So if a defendant comes in and says, okay, everything is fixed, and often they want to come in and show us pictures, we still adjourn until there's a final inspection done.
We often have defendants who say, well, I did everything, so my case is over, right? No.
Yeah.
Now we got to talk fines. That's where Sony ends up having to try the case, because they don't want
Right.
to have the fines.
But I think you used a key word. This was very strategic when we discussed this a number of months ago
Right.
and how to get this going. And I think Joe actually participated in a conversation, said, look, if you do this, it takes about 6 months, the word gets out, and then things begin to change. Maybe we're seeing that now.
And I do want to clarify, there were some changes that we did legislatively last year,
Right.
which allowed us, that strengthened the ability for code enforcement in the properties that are the 3 units or more. And that's what you're referring to with the 1,500 properties that need to be inspected, that I know you had looked through the numbers and looked at how you could fit them all into a calendar and reach out to all the property owners and get them all scheduled, and then go through that and get through that every 3 years. And now you have hopefully a nearly full staff, or at least one more staff member to try and get that underway. So that, Debbie, I see you're crossing your fingers that that's going to happen, but that is a marked improvement. That the groundwork was laid last year with the legislative change and the staffing increase and the strategy that you're undertaking now to be able to go through systematically to address all of those properties that are encompassed in the 3 or more with the fire inspections. That's a significant number of properties in our community that haven't currently been getting those regular inspections. So that's going to be a significant increase in the code enforcement that's going on regularly, correct?
Yes, sorry. Yes, because, and some of the overcrowding issues doesn't necessarily always, I mean, generally, people believe they're always in the 1 and 2 families. They will be in the 3 and 4 family. A 3 family would be operating as a 5 family, but we have access now that they have to comply, that we have to get in and do these fire inspections, and those will be, that they'll be seen and observed when we are able to do the fire inspections. And correct, if I'm correct, I mean, we can give them the notice about these fire inspections, and if they refuse to comply with that, then we can get a court order to say that they're not complying with the state requirements to do so. So I think it's going to get better. I just think that it is going to take some time. I did offer if we have some events that we've done in the past, like at the library, where it's been announced and some people have come in, tenants, to discuss with them about what they are allowed to be expecting when they get an apartment, to educate them. We've had some people, we've had some turnout and have sat and explained to them, and people have told me, I pay $1,500 a month, and I said, well, you pay a good amount of money for rent. You are entitled to get decent living and housing. If you're paying, full rent price, it's not like you're paying $500 and there's a reason why you're accepting less. And just going and speaking to them gives them enough confidence to realize that they can come to the department. And I think what's also been very helpful is the fact that I speak to them in Spanish gives them a comfort, because I get a lot of phone calls where in the Hispanic community where they specifically come up or call and they want to speak to me, and they feel comfortable talking about it because they have somebody they can converse with and who can understand what they're saying. And I can guide them into what their rights are and how we can handle their issues and their problems. So I think that gives them more of a comfort zone. that maybe in the past they felt I didn't know how to express the issues and the complaints they have, but now they have the ability to do so. And I have no issues, having that discussion with them. They can come up, they can send it to me either with a phone call or an email. That's why we also decided to try to make the brochures for them. We're trying to give them the idea that, the department is diverse. And I think that would help the community a lot, because they'll feel more comfortable with bringing, those situations to our attention.
Thank you. Questions and comments for Joe and Sonia? Were there more topics that either of you wanted us to touch on while Joe and Sonia are here?
Well, just in terms of update on strategies, I'd alluded, I think the last time I spoke to the board, that on the abandoned properties. And the city of Schenectady gave a presentation at the NICOM conference about their success with the abandoned properties law and the ability to take title to those properties. One of the benefits if the village were to take title to the property is they take title free and clear of all other mortgages that may exist on the property. So it's theirs without any outstanding liens, which is really a benefit. And the key in that is an initial determination by the building department that the building is in fact abandoned as defined by the law. That can deal, that there's different definitions of abandonment, but effectively that the building is not properly protected from the elements. In some of the cases it deals with that rent has not been paid, but if we don't know that, as long as it's not properly protected, the building department can file a declaration which essentially says it is an abandoned building. And then the municipality can proceed with efforts to have the building declared as abandoned. What Schenectady found is that in the majority of cases where they made that application, the property owner responded and made the repairs because they were aware that they would likely lose the property. But in at least 8 or 10 cases, they have in fact taken title to the property over the past 15, 16 months. What they do in Schenectady, for example, is they, and Yonkers has done this with regard to tax foreclosures, is you sort of look at areas in your village where you might be thinking of possibly doing development, and if there are a lot of abandoned properties in those areas, that's how Yonkers is getting themselves a new school district, Mayor.
Is this legal?
Yeah, absolutely. If, let's say you have 7 properties on a block where there have been no taxes paid, you can take them all in tax foreclosure. Yonkers, that's how Yonkers is getting a new school on Ravine Avenue. I should know because I did most of those foreclosures, so I'm just sort of letting you know. There is nothing illegal about it. If the building is abandoned, it's abandoned. I'm just saying that what the village can look at is where these buildings are, because ultimately you become the owner of the building. So you may have an idea of what you want to do with that particular location. You don't have to just choose any particular building, but the idea of having a building declared abandoned is one of the things that they brought out in the discussion at NICOM. Is it's a much quicker process than a foreclosure or a tax foreclosure. Generally, from the initial notice until an order of the court can be as little as 6 to 8 months. And as an example, a foreclosure in New York takes now about 3 years. New York is one of the slowest states with regard to foreclosure. So there is a significant advantage to doing that. And, Sonia and I will work with the building department in terms of seeing if there are such buildings which qualify in that way, and then we would come back to this board so that we can proceed with those actions. Those actions are brought in Supreme Court in White Plains. They're not brought in the Justice Court here. And at the end of the day, there is a deed which is effectively transfers that property over to the village. But again, what has happened in a number of these cases is that either the lender or the owner wakes up and says, I don't want to lose this property, because you have to give notice to everyone who has something to do with that property. And frankly, if there's a bank who has just been sort of sitting on their back and doing nothing, the likelihood is they're going to wake up and they don't want to lose that property. But if they don't, and if they do and they fix it up, you're fine. One of the things that Sonia and I have found is that on a number of our cases involving particularly property code violations, they involve houses that are in foreclosure. So what we now do is we check the property records to see who the bank is, and we communicate with the bank's attorney. Banks don't like to have orders of remedy or notices of appearance, because one, since it's a bank, it's a corporation, they have to come to court, and they have to explain to a judge who, and most people don't like to represent mortgage companies, and explain, why haven't you cleaned up the property, or why haven't you secured this, or why, and they have, as Sonia and I can tell you, a multitude of excuses, but it all comes down to that we basically didn't know what was going on at that particular house. So what we do instead is we deal with the banks, and we've had actually pretty good success with having them come in and make the necessary repairs, which is what they do. And that's been a positive, because it's not always easy finding the person to speak to, but ultimately when you can, particularly if the bank's represented by an attorney, it's easier. We're able to get that particular compliance with getting the bare necessity that just has to be done. Keep your house secured in some way. Keep the grass cut. We had a discussion recently with regard to a particular property in the northern part of the village, and I spoke to the person. They've got a new vendor who's going to cut the grass, and they're going to be doing things like that, because that's one of the things that we watched. It's, Mayor, as you know, it's one of the ordinances we changed last year to make the property owner responsible essentially to the curb with regard to keeping the grass cut and keeping it below the minimum height. That has been more. As we get to the summer, I expect we'll see more of those violations, because they get reported to us by DPW, and then those get written up. But we are, seeing that. We're seeing, a stronger action with regard to, as I said, code enforcement. Sonia looks at every order to remedy before it is issued by the code enforcement officers, so that we have a certain consistency in terms of what is being said. There's no extraneous language. It's just essentially, like from Dragnet, just the facts, just put the facts in, and that's all that's there. So that it makes it a lot easier for us, a lot easier for the court. We also use photographs all the time. Particularly, it's very important with the garbage violations, because what often, and it's to be pointed out, as Joe was mentioning, particularly with the violations under 225, which is the section dealing with the garbage, those tend to be cleared up if someone gets a ticket right away, but they're responsible if the garbage is there. It's not like it's not like if you haven't gotten your electrical and you gotta have some time to do it. That's just, you're liable just for having the garbage out there, which is also something that takes some explaining to folks out there, because they think, it's just out there, what does it matter? But again, I think that's an educational one. We've gotten people to do that. Jamie Fiella and Charlotte Mountain, who's our newest code enforcement officer, are writing a lot of those tickets. Sonia and I often comment on how much longer the court calendar has gotten, because we see a lot of those there. But again, as I said, in most cases, those people are coming in and paying. And they're doing it, and it's been taken care of. But pictures in these cases literally are worth 1,000 words, because if you can show the court and show, if the person has an attorney, what it is, it makes a difference. And we've had cases. We had someone who, for months, we were trying to get them to give us a certification with regard to their building, where they were putting an air conditioner on top. I think we know which building we're talking about. We could get nothing. But finally, we literally went up the corporate ladder and got someone who said, basically, I got to get this done. And what they're going to essentially do is redo what they did, because they can't provide a certification now, because no one can dig down and say exactly what it looks like. But those are the things that they're doing more of now, which is, beneficial, I think, for all concerned. So we're getting, really, really, really good results.
Thank you. And you have been updating us as the state laws have changed with our ability to declare a property vacant and abandoned, and I'm glad that there are more pathways for us to be able to address some of these unsightly buildings that really take away from the whole neighborhood, and it happens in a number of neighborhoods in Ossining. So I'm very pleased that we have the ability to more proactively go after them. What I was questioning about, was it legal, was targeting particular neighborhoods. That seemed like it might be problematic.
Well, again, if you have, And I'll give you the example in Yonkers. They had 6 locations on a street, all of which their taxes hadn't been paid. And they were consecutive lots, owned by different people.
Owned by different people, okay.
So basically, what happened was, the city is looking at it saying, we need another school, you know? So they would say, okay, do your foreclosures at that location, because the quicker I can get those pieces of property, the quicker I can start the process for doing that. So it's not as if they were, you know, they could have told me to go to any property, but those were there. And it was an unusual circumstance. And one of the reasons in that case where things had to be a little quicker is that you had existing property owners on either side. And frankly, the concern was that these would, knowing the city's interest, they'd bid on these, forcing that, because the city in a tax foreclosure, I don't want to get into the weeds here, is limited as to what they can bid. They can't bid more than what's owed on the taxes. So if these people want to bid a lot more, the city would lose those properties. So it's sort of a way, but it's not a target in the sense that you're just looking at, these are the
Okay.
ones that happen to be there. And importantly, it wasn't one owner. It was,
Right.
I think, of the 6 properties, was 5 different owners.
Okay. Then I just, the other thing that sort of popped out, that I don't know if has always been the practice, Sonia, you review every OTR? Has that always been the practice?
No.
Since I started.
Okay.
It actually, it's better because it allows us, when if it gets into court and becomes a court appearance ticket, the language is just much more professional.
Effective.
Yeah,
More
yeah.
effective, and as, additionally, if it goes to, if the matter ends up at trial, you know, the OTR is something that's presented, and if there's deficiencies in that, then that's going to definitely hamper your chances at being successful at the trial. So it's very beneficial in the short run and in the long run.
And I would imagine since you began that practice, you have seen, everybody in your department, Joe, is probably learning how to do it better and needing,
Yeah.
and just it starts off in a better position.
Yeah, because a lot of it is kind of repetitive, except for some specifics to that particular violation. But if you're using the same language, after a while, I believe in the beginning, there was a lot of corrections obviously being made, but as we're going along, there's a lot less. The motor tickets now are being reviewed, and they're good, they're fine.
Excellent,
So
excellent.
it's part of the education on how to write it better.
Glad to hear it.
One other thing I did want to mention that we didn't talk about was, quickly, that we discussed also about having a registry and a procedure in place for businesses, so that we can discuss
That's actually the next
What a
agenda item. But
wonderful
while you guys,
segue.
well done, Joe.
Before you get there, can you please, can you paint a picture of what it's like to go to a house that is overcrowded? Like, when you're finding these units, are they always in the attic? Are they always in the basement? I mean, what does it look like?
In some cases, yeah, it's some in the attic. It could be in the basement. There's spaces where, you know, something that may be a small room or something that should be used as like a walk-in closet where it's not the minimum size. Maybe it's a space, like I've had one recently where a young child was sleeping in a room that was a closet. It had no windows, it had no ventilation, it wasn't the minimum size. They shouldn't have been sleeping in there. And to be honest with you, if there was a fire, the fire department would never have access to take that individual out. That's considered overcrowding. Overcrowding for us is not necessarily, has nothing to do with, relationship of who's renting and what's, are you renting and are you related to this person? If you have an apartment that has 3 bedrooms and each bedroom accommodates 2 occupants by size dimensions, and it has a proper egress, your apartment can accommodate 6. Pick the 6. It's not going to be 14 people. It's overcrowding. If people are sleeping in the living rooms on the floor, you have too many people. But when I've gone to some where, yes, people have been sleeping in an attic and their electricity is being fed by an extension cord from the apartment below, plugged in and brought upstairs through the ceiling, and they're sleeping up in an attic. It's August and it's 110 degrees and they got an air conditioner in that one window. And if they were to get up too quickly out of the bed, they'd slam their head on the roof rafters. In this particular case, the stairway to reach up to that attic was what I first thought was just a medicine cabinet in a bathroom, and I opened it up and it was the stairs. So if someone was in the bathroom and they locked that door, there is no way out of there. In some cases, the overcrowding is just, basements that are not habitable as basements for living spaces, and the people have their beds, and they're sleeping right next to the boiler. And that's, they're breathing in carbon monoxide. So those are conditions where you make a decision and say, I can't leave the residents living here in these conditions, and therefore, we've had some where Con Edison has come out and there's a gas leak and they have natural gas they're breathing in an apartment. Not habitable.
Thank you.
Before we transition to the business registry?
I just had a quick one. I'm very happy to know that we know the process or are learning the process, Stuart, of determining our ability to address abandoned homes and or properties in the village. I'm not necessarily pushing that because I think that if we really get the message out to property owners that the village has no problem taking over your land if you don't, if it's because it's creating a whole. However, we're not in the business of real estate and we could barely take care of our properties that we have right now. So I have no intention, at least until we could take care of our own properties, to have a discussion about taking on more properties. But I think it's good for residents and property owners to know that it's something that we're also addressing, and it's also an ability that we have. So thank you for clarifying that.
Trustee Herrera, I agree with you 100% that we are not in the real estate business, and I don't want the village to be taking on additional properties. And we have discussed this in the past. We've considered if there were properties that it was appropriate for us to take ownership of, that there would be potentially a quick turnaround to work with some other entity, some organization that might be able to take ownership of the building and renovate it or knock it down, depending on the level of the condition. Because I agree, I don't think we want to be gobbling up property and then having to maintain and deal with property that somebody else wasn't maintaining. But it sounds like by undertaking this approach more proactively, in a number of circumstances, the property owners then realize that they seriously have to start taking care of it. And that's the ideal scenario for us. It's not that we ever take property ownership of the property, but that the owners take responsibility for it. Debbie, you ready to jump in
Right.
here?
So thanks for that lead-in to the next subject.
Very welcome.
Stuart, do you want to introduce this topic, or?
Sure, why not? Thanks, Sonia,
You're welcome.
very much.
Good night.
Good night, Sonia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As Joe said, we were, and this is something I had actually discussed with the board a couple of months ago on the issue of registration of new commercial businesses within the village. And what I'll just pass around for everybody. These are two different ordinances, both from upstate New York. One from the town of Ellicott and one from the town of West Seneca. So not ones that we deal with a lot here. But what they both have in common is that they require a new business to get some approval, the type of approval we can, quibble over, but some approval from the building department that their ability to go into a new space, be it as rental or buyer, is in a proper zone, depending on what business they want. That do they need permits? Do they not need permits? And it allows the municipality, and it would allow the village to do something which it cannot do now, which is in fact know what new businesses are coming in at any particular time. And effectively, so therefore, in the case of any purchase or lease of commercial property, the prospective tenant would go into the building department and, essentially, file, be it a permit or an application with them saying, we're coming into this particular location, and we're planning this particular type of use. And it's more, at this point, informational to the building department and to the village to say, okay, you're planning to do this particular type of business. I think the best example, let's say, is with automotive, because we have different types of automotive businesses that are permitted under our code. And the person may say, well, I'm planning to do automotive with different bays and all this stuff. And, Joe might look at that and may say, well, the problem is that where you're planning to move, that's not a permitted use. It's not allowed. Or it's a permitted use, but if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do certain things that are going to require these permits from the office. Because what we often find is that some of these new businesses come in and are doing work without a permit, work that has not happened. We've recently issued OTRs to one business in particular that I'm aware of that, started doing their work before the permit was issued. And if they have to come to the building department first, we begin to know who those businesses are. We know who the principals of those businesses are. And this becomes a responsibility of both landlord and tenant if it is in fact a rental situation, or just purchaser if it's just a purchaser. And it would require, that notice. It's not a business registration in that sense, something we've talked about before, but it is the ability of the building department to know who's going into what space and whether that's legitimate. As I said, if necessary, a building permit would be needed, and that's something the building department can follow up with and see what's necessary under those circumstances. Find that if there's an active CO. If it's a new business coming in, it probably will require a new fire inspection. Well, Joe and the folks there are aware of it. They can schedule the fire inspection and be able to get in there, do that, check how the sprinklers are working, particularly in a commercial location. And that, this sort of would also provide us with a database of who those people are. If you were to ask who is the contact person for XYZ business on, let's say, Croton Avenue, we just don't know. We literally do not have that information. We do have it to some extent with some of our residential places. We know who managing agents are because we just know who we deal with. But from a commercial perspective, we don't know. And this at least gives some information to the village, about that. It may not even be something that the board thinks will require a fee. It may just be that the person comes into the building department, but there may be a minor fee because there's work involved. I mean, it is something that's going to have to be checked out potentially. But at least, we would then know with these commercial buildings what is going on. The sort of subset to this is what do you do with vacant commercial space in the village? And what a number of places have done, Yonkers is one that comes immediately to mind, is they have what's called a vacant building registry, where effectively property owners who have vacant buildings, and we know who they are because they're still paying, let's assume they're paying their taxes, we're not dealing with a tax delinquent situation. Those individuals are required each year to essentially register with the building department that they have a vacant building. It's sort of a vacant building list. And what they have to do is put a certain amount of money in escrow, be it $2,500, $5,000, because they may be a vacant owner, but they also may be doing no work to maintain the property. And while the village may have to make those do that work, primarily cutting the grass, maybe checking on windows, if there is a fund that each of these owners is required to basically put, we have something we can draw down from immediately. We don't have to wait to just, essentially assess it on a tax lien, which could be years before you're necessarily seeing that. And particularly, and more of a problem is that if they are current in their taxes, they may just pay that, but you're not going to see it. So that's time that comes out. A vacant building registry, and we have a number of vacant spaces. We know what they are, and we see them there. And Joe and I hear about them all the time. And this at least, again, provides us with people, we can directly get in contact with. A couple of these buildings, I'll tell you the truth, they're in court with us virtually every single week. And in some cases, they don't know where the owner is, or the owner is not available, or issues have not gotten resolved. And part of it is maintenance. These are really maintenance issues. Windows are not being taken, are not closed. The building is open to the elements. The grass is not getting cut. If you have a registry and you're requiring the owner to do this, or to put something in escrow, then you at least have funds that you can draw down on. You can make those repairs. Now, enforcement becomes the issue, because how do you enforce that they actually pay you? And that's something that, that has to be looked into. Yonkers, my recollection, when I was doing their work, had a list of about 300 or 400 abandoned commercial properties. But that was their list, which means they had properties where people were actually, putting money down. One would think how many more there are not on that list. But these are sort of two sides of the same coin. The commercial occupancy requirement, I think, is one which will give more information to the village, particularly to the building department, as to what's going on in a particular property. It will put notice on both the owner and the tenant as to what has to be, what is necessary in a particular location. In some situations, all the building department will say is fine, I hope you're, because there's literally nothing that has to be done. If he's opening a particular, let's say, a toy store, and before it was a same type of variety store, there's probably very little that needs to be done. There may have to be an inspection, there may have to be a fire check, they may have to check the sprinklers, but in terms of work that needs to be done, permits, things like that, probably very little. But for other types of businesses, particularly if someone comes in and is asking to change the use, and I'll give you a prime example of that. We had a circumstance very recently before the zoning board where someone wanted to put a laundromat in a location which was no longer a laundromat. Now, had that person come to the, and he did, but had he followed what we have here, he would have been told early on, you're going to have a real problem here. You're going to have to, you might have to go for a variance, you might have to do certain things. And in the general circumstance where you have a lot of businesses coming in and out, and we particularly the building department, we don't know what's going in there until, frankly, we get either a set of plans or after it's opened up. And in some of those cases, then the barn door's closed already. There's not much we can do. In case of certain businesses where a license is required, we can and have requested to see the license, make sure that the person who's operating it, in fact, is licensed by the state of New York or the education department, and we've asked for that on occasion. And also, if it's a business that requires a license, we can also obviously make the police department aware that this particular business is thinking of opening at this location, because that also could potentially, create, violations under the penal law if there are certain issues there. So that provides information to the village, which, as I said, now we don't have that information. We have no such database. We have literally no way to know who's coming into any particular commercial location at any given time. That's why, Debbie and I have discussed it, Joe has discussed, I've discussed it with Joe, to have some sort of occupancy sort of notification that would go to the building department. And the obligation would really fall, it could be the landlord or it could be the owner or the tenant. These put the onus on the tenant to go to the building department, because it's the tenant who is basically going to be taking over the space, or the new purchaser. But in either event, to allow that individual or that entity to go to the building department and get information from the building department. As Joe said before, getting that information tends to answer a lot of the questions that you're otherwise going to have. It's important, particularly for a business that has not been in Ossining before, to know the lay of the land, because everyone's zoning code is a little different. Everyone's housing maintenance code is a little bit different. Even though we all follow the state code, we all have nuances in our own. We may require something in our building code that, Newcastle does not, or that Elmsford does not. But they've opened there, and they think, well, they can do the same thing here. This will allow the building department to answer those questions and follow up on it if necessary. My view, and as I said, I've discussed with Debbie, is that this type of ordinance, I think, would be beneficial for the village to provide that type of notification for, various village departments. And also, it's frankly also a safety issue, because if these businesses open and we don't know, and then afterwards, we come in and find out there's been a violation, as I said before, those violations could have been cured before. Be as simple as just making sure your electrical certification is done, but it's taken care of. So that's the point behind these two. I should point out, as I mentioned to the board once before, these are the only two localities in the state where I've actually found this type of ordinance. They're both in the same county. I think it's Erie County, Erie or Chautauqua County. So that may explain why that something was going on out there. But in any event, I think it's something for this board to consider in terms of having a particular type of, we're going to call it registry, or at least notification required to be provided, via the building department.
No doubt that's going to prompt questions.
Well, the only thing I would add to that, like we've had in some cases where the only reason why it came to our attention is, the applicant pulled the building permit for some work to be done within a business, but if they did not pull the building permit, and it wasn't brought to our attention, we've had some where, like I have one recently now, where they were opening up a business, and if it wasn't for the fact that they were told to come on in and take a building permit, because they started doing the construction work without a permit, but when they came in to bring the building permit, they actually found out, after I reviewed the plans, that you need to go to the planning board because you have a conditional use here. And then they were upset because now it has delayed their opening and their ability to do the work, because I can't give them the permit until they get that planning approval. And now they're not going to really go on the board for another 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So in benefit for the person who has the intention of opening a business in Ossining, this is very important, because it's in their benefit as well, that if we had something like this and it was brought to my attention earlier, they would have been guided to the right procedures of what they needed to do, and it wouldn't have been a problem for their own purpose, for their own opening in their business. And then it changes the sentiment of a person who's opening a business who makes the remark to say, I'm trying to open a business in Ossining, and now I have something I wasn't aware of, and they perceive it as red tape. That, now I'm being told after the fact, after I've signed the lease and I committed, but if you had this particular type of registry where they needed to do that, they would have been guided to the right procedures right from the start. And I think it makes a better relationship of the person who is looking to open up something in Ossining, that not saying that their business in this particular case wasn't something they couldn't open, but there was conditions that needed to be set by the planning board. And now they perceived it as, I've been delayed and I can't open for 3 more months, let's say.
Trustee Herrera, I saw you grab your microphone. Are you eager to ask questions?
I'm not eager, just ready. Stuart, I think you said it best, that it's a safety issue and also a quality of life issue. However, I believe that this is a good first step in developing a comprehensive type of business registry. I would like to see an aspect of the village clerk that issues so many business-related permits and licenses. I know that it's completely different than what's issued in the building department, but if we're really going to be proactive and help new applicants that are starting businesses here, to have them do a new registry application, then have them go to Mary Ann, then have them go here, then have them go back, then have them, at some, I would like to see if we could somehow, respecting each entity and role, but kind of working together to have a streamlined process. My other comment was, what can we do to get a roll of current businesses? in the village? Can we grandfather them in? Is that where the board makes a discussion about, you know what, we're not going to charge these people. We just want to know who runs the business and what they operate. And is it just brick and mortar, or is it also our offices on second floors and third floors? What do they do, right? What are their uses? If we're going to do it, I just want to do it right and comprehensive. But this is a great first step, so thank you.
Debbie, it looked like you wanted to comment on something that was raised.
Sure. I really support this type of legislation for several different reasons. One of them being what Joe and Stuart have already said, and that is the safety aspect of this. I've talked with the fire department. You know, we talked about the ways that we could gather information and share it with them so that when they're responding, not just fire department, but also our rescue forces. If Joe has an opportunity to go into a facility as it's first built, and the documents can then be uploaded and they have access to them when they're rolling up to a scene, they can pull those documents and they'll know where the shutoff valves are, where the electric panel is, how you get in, how you get out. I mean, there's so much valuable information there. I think that we can promote this as a very positive step for us, as opposed to, oh gosh, here comes government again, in that, you know, we're not trying to have another fee. We just want the information. So when we talked a little bit about the fees, we wouldn't make it a nominal fee. And as I was just sitting here, I was thinking, well, if you do have to get a permit, maybe the fee gets applied towards that permit or something like that, so that, you know, if it's just somebody that we're collecting the initial information on, and we don't have to do anything, then that's great. It's a $50 fee or some, I don't know what the fee would be, but if they have to go through the planning process. We have been trying, and Joe's been really good. I mean, you see the brochures he's putting together. We are trying to be customer service oriented. And the only way we can help someone through the complexities of planning and building permit is to get them in the door in the beginning before they get confused about things, and what I consider to roll out the red carpet for them and say, all right, where are you going? What do you need? All right, you're going to need this and this and this, and let's help you get that. Not tonight, but I'm going to be proposing that there are some permits that we put online, and so some of those things like applying for this permit and that permit could be done online by the customer, but the only way we can educate them, Joe said that several times tonight, is to get them in the door. And you did ask about how do we collect the data for the businesses that are here, and that's actually one of the economic development strategies that we'll talk about later on in the summer, is actually gathering that information and going door to door and saying, you know, here we are, we're the village, thank you so much for having your business here. This is some information that we're trying to collect, and this is the reason why we're doing it. Again, it's so that we can help you, and also if anything should happen at your location, we have the data that we need to share with our security forces as well. So I think it's a great way for us to start that conversation of customer service, and we want to be here to help you, not to thwart your efforts. You know, we're talking about how we put the building process together. We're talking about the process that for the planning and zoning and all of those things, so that when you come in the door, you know exactly what pathway you're on. And I really think the only way we do that is if we have, you know, first opportunity to talk with somebody that's coming in. And I do think that, as Joe has said and other things, is as that word gets out and people are saying, oh, okay, the village is going to help us, and a few people get through the process and it's a lot better for them, it's more streamlined, that word will get out. I've seen it happen, and then more and more people are willing to come forth, and Joe's not out there with his crews finding people doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. So again, it's not that we want to stop you, it's that we want to make you safe, and that's really the message here. And Joe can't make you safe if he's not looking and seeing what's going on. And from an economic development status, if we look at the type of businesses that we have and we find that there are other businesses that we want to attract, then we can celebrate what's already here, because we'll have a database of that, and we can say, but we already have, you know, this great array of businesses, and you would fit in here very nicely. So it's going to go along with an economic development strategy we'll be putting together later. But I really support this, and again, it's not the negative, oh dear, here you come again. It's, no, we really want to help you. And I know that's a little oxymoron sometimes with government, but we really do want to help you. So.
So I sort of wrote down 7 points to look at. They're somewhat suggestions. 3 of them have already been hit, but I'm just going to go through a list as ideas. Very supportive of this. Just some things to think about. So I would start from a customer-centric point of view, right? And I would say, how do you create a welcome kit on the website and everywhere else that says, bring it all the pieces you just discussed, bring it all together to welcome, and then it could also be printed out. And there is a very easy way, because when we looked at websites, I think if you're a new business, this is like, you know, and there actually exists another. So I think we start from thinking what it feels like to be a new business. I actually think in this legislation, unlike most, it would be easier to deal with the ones that are looking to open up business and then go into the existing ones who might say things like, yeah, I don't want to do this. Like, what are you going to do to me? I mean, really, I think like you start with the new, then figure out the grandfathering piece of it, because people already here will see what you're doing for the new ones. I understand for most bankers that most businesses spend 6 months to 12 months scoping where they're going to be, unless they just happen to like Ossining, they grew up here and they want to open some whatever reason. But if you actually have a business, you're saying, where is it best? So I think it's almost too late, actually, when they're already even thinking about it. And we've had a lot of cases where people are very angry, not knowing from day one, and they hired employees that they now have to pay, but they don't even have a business yet. So I totally heard what you said about it. So start from the welcome, so that would be one. The second thing, Stuart, you already know this, is I don't see here actually the enforcement discussion and the punitive. Like when somebody says, no, I'm not doing this, or if somebody lies, it's 3 bays and 4 employees, but it's actually 5 bays and an outside construction and 42 employees, and on Sunday, they just sort of lie. So now what are you going to do and who's going to do it? I'm not answering the question. I'm just saying I don't see in the very quick read what, enforcement, and then who does the enforcement, police versus how do you do stuff on weekends when we, you know, so the if you don't do this, what happens piece is sort of missing for me from reading this, so I just want to put it out there for you. I think explaining that we need to know who does business here, but see, for me, when you were talking, Stuart, there are 2 people who own a business. The person who owns a building and collects money on that business owns a business.
Correct.
And they cannot just, we can't keep acting like they don't know what's going on. I didn't know there was a massage parlor going on here, really.
Talk about it.
So I really feel what's missing is a responsibility on people who, by the way, I think are investors in our community. So this is not to belittle the owners of these buildings, but I'm not so sure I agree with it should be the tenant opening the business as your core business, but rather the person who owns a business for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, or inherited the building, because they actually are the ones that should be held responsible. So I would just, opinion of mine, not a legal opinion, an opinion that there are really 2 business owners, the owner of the building renting it out, and the renters who are opening a restaurant, a garage, or whatever it is that they're opening up. And I just don't see it anywhere here. But you brought it up, actually, when you talked about, it's really all about the people leasing. The businesses, not the building owners who's leasing, but there needs to be a better connection for me in these kind of registries.
It's interesting you should mention that, because in the ordinances that a number of municipalities up the Hudson have with regard to residential properties, where there is going to be someone, renting a new unit or renting a new building or buying a new residential. Those ordinances, Tarrytown has it, I believe Peekskill does. The onus is on the owner to first tell the tenant or prospective purchaser it's their obligation, and it's the owner who has to do this. When I say owner, I mean the seller. Let me be precise. The seller's obligation. But interesting, and the penalty is exceptionally high. It's a $10,000 fine if you basically move into the place without having gone through what they call a certificate of compliance process, Peekskill does this, it's $10,000. So, because the view basically is, you're going into a location, you have not gotten the required permits, you haven't allowed the building inspector to come in and basically say, this is okay, this is fine, this is built well. So, and that fine actually goes to the seller, because they put the onus on the seller, not the buyer. Unless by contract, the two have agreed that it basically should be shifted. So, but we'll look
This
at
is
that.
something to think about, because
Yeah.
we have had cases where we've had people say, like, why didn't, I didn't know this. And,
Right.
and to your point, when you have a business in another community, or a friend who has a business, you
Right.
just assume they're all the same. So that's one, but, and I am gonna go back to both the owners, the sellers, the buyers, and all the entities involved have to be viewed as our investors in our community. So $10,000 fees, I'm not for that. I mean, the
Understand.
whole, I would actually not charge my seventh point is, it goes back to number one, which is a welcome kit, which is, I don't think you should be charging anything for the first year of a new legislation. It should be, and I've said this before, it should be viewed as like, let's get this going. I believe the savings alone in your time and all of the time of all the staff for people to participate, we find a time limit, a year, or this, or first time, nothing gets charged, not for our work. Let's just get this going. After that, you start the clock ticking about the next person that moves in the next, because if you're welcoming people into your community, you should be welcoming them, not hindering their progress. They have enough expenses, and all parties concerned, and I think we'll see huge gains just in efficiencies from doing something like this, and everybody's got skin in the game. The government, the tenants, the land, and the whole bit. So that would just be something for me that I want to throw out there. I'm not suggesting you have to do that or not, but it's just something for maybe to think about. So those were what I sort of wrote down as you guys were talking.
Anyone on this side of the table? Yes, Deputy Mayor Callahan.
Yeah, I would agree with Trustee Levin about the connection between the owner of the building and, I mean, he could rent out a space to somebody and they think they're gonna be compliant, and either the owner doesn't know or he doesn't care or whatever, and all of a sudden they're in a situation where, you know, they've signed a lease, they're locked in with this owner, and now they can't open their business. So I think there needs to be a connection between the owner of the building and that, I mean, I don't know if we need to look at the lease, but they need to rent that space for a business that's compliant. I mean, it makes no sense, you know. They need to have skin in the game. They have to rent the space for its appropriate use. And if that business, if it does require a variance, the owner of the building needs to tell a person that's gonna rent that, well, yeah, I can rent this to you, but, you know, it might not be compliant, and there may be other things that you have to do to open that business. The other thing that I noticed was that the code in West Seneca actually calls for a renewal. I believe that's in the second section here. So I don't know if that was something that you were thinking of, whether this would be a one-time thing or whatever, but there's actually a renewal clause on the back page. I don't know if that's something that you want. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, it's common here already, but I think this is something we need to do. It's something we've talked about, and thanks for bringing it
I
to the
think
floor.
from the renewal perspective, we've also been, Joe's looking up the number of the businesses that we have not yet inspected for a long time. And each business is supposed to get an annual inspection. So once we know who it is, you wouldn't have to get a renewal because you would be on the inspection list.
Yep.
Thank you, Trustee Levin, for your comments, and thank you, John, as you showed us about the renewal clause. I do recall from even the first conversation there being some consensus about making sure that owners actually have some skin in the game. So that'll be my comments. I actually do agree with both my colleagues. So hopefully going forward we can see a clause where owners do have some responsibility to allow future and prospect tenants to know what kind of business they can open. Thank you.
I just wanted to stress the point. I'm totally supportive. However, our scope is that you want to proceed, and I think this conversation today kind of proves that we all want to move forward with the conversation, and it's something we all want. I just really want to stress the importance of working with like all the department heads, including Marianne Roberts, because you don't know how many times over this past year alone, the building department said this, well, Marianne said this, well, the police said this, well, the village manager's office said this. And I think that, that's what we're trying to address here. That, so I definitely, if we can get who you feel is best appropriate to bring into the conversation as far as process or application, or whether it's the building department or the clerk's office, I think that'll be helpful. And also the Chamber of Commerce, as far as feedback from the business community, their experiences, and any other group or entity that has a lot of involvement or stake in business or in the commercial base of Ossining.
I just want to say thank you, Trustee Herrera. And I think somewhat of what Trustee Levin was talking about as far as the welcome package, if those things can be coordinated with our clerk's office, there's no better welcome than to know that, okay, when you're coming and you're starting a business, to say, okay, these are all the things that we have to do. So if that's actually possible, which I also recall from the previous conversations, that'd be great.
Just to address that, the thing is, the clerk issues to businesses refreshment license, cabarets, coin-operated, and then they ask the building department to sign off. We get a copy of all of their applications, and then it also, in certain I think in all circumstances, goes to the police as well. But what we're doing essentially is that triggers the fire inspection. Well, if they pass the fire inspection, we sign it, we send it back to them as our portion of that is approved for them to issue that license. But what we really, the correct way to be able to do this would be is not to wait for the clerk to be giving us these to sign off and say that triggers the inspection. We want to have this list so that we're, during the entire year, doing the inspection, and then when the clerk gets their application for that particular business that's requesting that thing, the inspection's already been done, they're approved.
So it should start with your department then. That's what
I think so, because that would speed up the process for her applications, because we've already performed that, say, last month or 2 weeks ago, because we're hitting all the businesses that require those fire inspections. And essentially, rather than waiting for her to take an application to give it to us, and now we're scheduling the inspection, by the time she's ready to issue those licenses every year, the inspection's already been done. So I think that's a good benefit to have the registry that way.
Thank you to all of our staff for finding a really constructive way to address a big concern that we have. This really came to us. This solution came to us as a potential way to address concerns about unwelcome businesses, some legitimate massage parlors that have existed in our community, and looking at that one particular type of business that may be problematic prompted this conversation. And I'm grateful to my colleagues and all of their comments and questions. You've really illuminated a lot of the questions and concerns that I have and vetted them well. One of my big concerns was that we don't want to be onerous for new businesses, not just in whatever the fee may be, but the exact opposite. And so framing it as a welcome and as a well-coordinated approach with all of the departments and making it easier for businesses to open, I think makes a lot of sense. And Trustee Levin, I liked your idea of a 1 year no fee. That would give us an opportunity to figure out the process and really get the kinks out. And not be charging people while we're getting the kinks out. But also, it's a good opportunity for the other concern that was raised about existing businesses, because existing businesses, they're here. They could apply the first day that we put it out there, and then they wouldn't be paying a fee to get in line, and they have a whole year to do that. So that makes it less of a burden for them. So a lot of really great points made here. So then my question would be, Stuart, this seems like this is a piece of legislation that you will be drafting for us based on the examples you have here and the discussion tonight?
Right. I will draft that. I know that our next work session is the 13th, but I know that's the session over at the library, so we could have that on the 27th, which would
Sounds good.
be in June, so that way, we can have a discussion at that point.
Sounds good.
I may recommend that we push it off just a little bit, and the reason why is
Whatever you
because,
want.
well, but here's why, and this is new news. We interviewed 2 candidates for the Director of Code Enforcement, and since this would be a new project and it would be under the Building Department, if we could sort of, if we're going to make an offer to one of them, I'd like them to weigh in a little bit on the process.
Okay, why don't we see how
That's
the
okay.
personnel aspect unfolds?
Yeah, and I mean, as per our discussion, I also wanted to give you time to, work on the process and further ideas on the, with, prospectively the clerk making the building department the first step, but, other departments and stuff, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agostinelli. We usually take a break around the 9 o'clock hour, so why don't we give ourselves a quick break? And I know we don't have too much more to go, but we'll,
Can we just do the cabaret real quick?
no, because it's not just real quick.
5 minutes, right? We're not taking a long break. 5 minutes.
I can make a phone call.
All right, welcome back. All right, right now proposed cabaret license for CRA Tavern, DBA doing business as Parisi's American Grill. Who's going to take this?
Well, I'll just start, and then I'll turn it over to the chief. This is an application for a cabaret license. There was a brief discussion with the board previously, but at that point, when it was realized that this was going to be a license effective July 1, we thought it would be better to bring it back as we became closer to the July 1st date. We're here now, and Chief, I'll let you go from your end.
Good evening. Last time we met, we discussed a long list of concerns the police department has about this business based on prior dealings in other businesses that the same owner had opened up. Tonight, I renew those concerns, and my recommendation to the board is that this permit be denied based on calls. And as I'm looking down just some notes on these, yes, we can say that there's not a lot of history between now and I believe 2014, which are late 15, was when the last business closed. But the calls there, arguing in the street, blocked driveways, noise complaints, people acting erratic, unruly patrons, the bar themselves calling and asking for assistance, people being attacked in the restrooms, noise complaints. More than one call where we've addressed cabaret operation without a permit. And to my knowledge, there's been at least 2 instances since this business has been open in its current location where they've operated without a cabaret license, doing things like comedy nights and things like that, albeit for charity. And we've used our discretion in those cases not to write summonses. But there's some indication here that the business owner is not necessarily following the rules, whether we ask or not. So my position as of the last meeting we had remains that I don't believe that there's any benefit to the community to have a cabaret in this particular location, and that beyond that, we've seen a substantial history of noncompliance and disturbance of the neighborhood when this business was open in the other locations.
Stuart, I have a question. So the current site, as we're all familiar, is the old Moose Lodge, which is down in the basement. They have a banquet area in the back that I was told is for private parties. Is that part of the current establishment and that we would call the bar entity applying for any permits and or what's operated now, or is the private party section of the facility separate?
All I can answer to you on that, Trustee Herrera, is we have a schematic of the area, which shows what appears to be a horseshoe bar with a number of tables. There's 2 fireplaces, dartboard. So it doesn't look like this is the rear area I think that you're describing, but what it says in the application is it simply says that, that it's going to be operated, and again, it describes the location as the CRA Tavern at 37 Croton Avenue. So I don't have an answer to the specific question. I can tell you that it was checked out by the building department, and after, I think, an initial failure, there was a pass with regard to the fire inspection. But all I have is the plan of where, where presumably this would be. Not being familiar with the location myself, other than where it is, but not inside, I'm not sure if this is to the rear, but that's the location as described.
That to me looks like the bar area.
Yes,
So
that's-
that answers my question.
Okay.
Then it does not include the banquet area. Okay,
Got it.
thank you.
Sure.
Question, how long has the current business been at this particular
I
address?
believe this is their second year, at least this is the second time we've seen a cabaret application. We have a lengthy history with the owner.
Questions and comments?
I think I had stated the last time that I supported the chief's recommendation at this time. I think I think what I would like to see is a period of at least history that we can look at in terms of the types of concerns that the chief has. I don't know what, we haven't seen any of the, we haven't mentioned any of the call records. You talked about the prior businesses, but have there been issues at the current location?
Was that all off the camera?
Well,
You might have to do that
I'll
one
just
again.
repeat myself and just say that I the last time we discussed this, I supported the chief's recommendation because I felt like some time needed to go by to make sure that we weren't that the establishment was being run properly and that we weren't having the issues that had happened at the prior establishment. And so I guess I'm looking for a record of compliance and a record of where there hasn't been the need for unnecessary police interaction in relationship to the operation of the business.
There's been an arrest there within the last month. I don't have the exact date of that. I do have a note that on April 22nd there was a call for service there with relation to two people fighting inside the bar and then brought outside. I'm not sure if that's the arrest that was made, but I know factually there was an arrest made at that location within the last 30 days.
So I actually said I don't have any comments, only because we've had this conversation, and like John, I think, I don't know if there's a change, but, we have a process in place, and for me, when the police, you usually recommend, and when you don't, I said last time I'll do it again. So the comment is the same as it was last time, which is, I take the police department's recommendation seriously, and am not in support of this.
So I guess, I guess the part of this is hard, right? Because I understand the history. I really do. And I just want to understand at what point, because if this business is in business for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, will we constantly say, hey, back in 2011, 2014, 2015, there were these issues? And also, like, even when there are issues at bars, there's alcohol, right? So I want to be clear, should people not call the cops when there's a fight? And if they do call the cops when there's a fight, will we hold that against them when we do cabarets? And let me just slightly finish, because, like, even when you go to Mamaroneck Avenue, right, and it's a popular area, the cops are always out there. And I know that Brazen and a slew of those restaurants have had calls, because that's what happens when you have people that go to bars. So I'm just trying to understand, I guess, either from the board standpoint, at what point do we say, hey, if you're good 5 years, with no calls, we'll give you a cabaret license? Or are we just essentially saying, hey, you know, there was a lot of issues with your business early on, and so you might as well not come back to this board because we're not going to give it to you. I'm just trying to figure out.
Can I answer for some of that? Because I think some of that's directed to the police department. You're asking if people should call the police. I know we get into sort of the absurd sometimes with should people call the police if there's a problem. And I know that we've ad nauseum had to tell people, whether it's over an immigration issue or it's over drinking in a bar, it's concerning that board members would still have to raise the issue of should you call the police. If your concern is that by calling the police, that over a history of 10 years, hundreds of calls are going to cause me to stand here and say that I'm factually documenting the fact that you've caused disturbance, then maybe those people shouldn't call the police. I don't know how to answer that question. When you ask if we're going to bring up 2008, 2009, I'm not bringing up 2008 or 2011. I'm talking about a volume of calls in 8, in 9, in 10, in 11, and in 12. This is systematic. It's not a handful of calls here and there. It's not sporadic. This is a consistent thing that we've seen. So my position would be that while we may not have had a large volume of calls lately, I submit to you that the fact they don't have a cabaret is aiding us in being able to keep things under control because the crowds don't get out of control. So I don't think the issue here is encouraging people not to call the police because we won't issue cabaret licenses. That's up to you. If you want to take 400 calls and say that you want to give another chance, that you're elected by the people to represent them. But I've been asked to come here as a recommendation from the police department, which is what we do professionally. We look at situations and make determinations on public safety. That's what I'm here for. And my recommendation is that based on at least 10 years of history I'm looking at right now, and the business goes back beyond that, that we've not had a good experience with this. Not on Main Street, not on Lower Main Street, and not on Croton Avenue.
So they had a cabaret license previously.
I believe there was a cabaret at some point. I know that there's a few calls here where cabarets were operating in spite of the fact that no permit had been issued.
So they were cabaret license, and so I guess we can make a direct correlation between cabaret license and disturbances.
We can make a direct correlation between the fact that people offer live music and increased crowds. And I can tell you that in the times where we've had the biggest trouble, it's when we've had the largest crowds. And I can't speak for the city of White Plains, but you may want to speak to some of the people that work in the conditions unit down there and see what their perspective is on alcohol and the establishments that are there. It may open your eyes.
So I'm somewhat familiar with the establishment. I can't recall live music. I can't recall coin operated, but I don't know. I guess.
So I'm telling you about documented police reports. You may not have been there that night. We are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, if you don't believe the police report, then I don't know what else to submit for recommendation if they're not valid.
It's not that I don't believe the police report. Again, it's the same question I asked last time. Should we tell this business not to come before this board? Because you raise a very good argument of why to ban this particular business owner from operating a cabaret license. So I just, like, at what point? Like, because then we can legislate. We can say, hey, if you get these many calls, you're never getting one again.
Do you have another comment?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Chief, for coming with a report. That is your role, and I thank you for doing that, as we do for all cabaret licenses in the village. I guess I have frequented, not all, but many restaurants and bars that have cabaret licenses, or didn't have them, and now they do. And I unfortunately, even in the ones that we least expected, have experienced with family and friends there, some unfortunate situations that come with being at a bar, restaurant late in the evening, and of course, particular businesses target different types of lifestyles and people and interests that produce different types of excitement or ways of channeling your consumption of food and alcohol. I guess my bigger concern past this particular applicant, even though I already raised kind of your point, you know, at what point does your background follow you, and at what point do you get a second chance, or maybe you don't, which is a discussion, which is fine. But obviously the village is investing and encouraging these types of businesses to open up, especially when it comes to alcohol and bars and nightlife. We're about to have the opening of a Sing Sing Kill Brewery, which I'm so excited, right, on Spring Street. That's going to attract people from across the state, county. I'm excited. My friends are excited. You know, hopefully going to have live music, attract crowds outside. Obviously, we expect, and I have the full confidence that all these establishments that have come and will come will be compliant and enforced and try to have security. But it leads more into the question that maybe Ossining is not the place for nightlife. And depending on what we feel it may produce or what certain people may act upon by visiting certain businesses, that maybe it's not what the village wants. Maybe we should have a curfew. Maybe, you know, it you know, it does a lot of questions. I am familiar with BID and White Plains, solely because, yes, they have challenges, and that's why their cabaret licenses have gone up when it comes to their fee, and their and they have a lot of other challenges that I will not speak on behalf of WPD or Mayor Roach, but we can invite one of the reps here to discuss how they've kind of done that. We're not a city, also, right? So we can't be operating as a city, which is a whole different conversation. But you know, do we have a conversation about having foot patrols in front of restaurants and bars in the summer or in the fall, walking up and down, increasing it? Do we have, you know, like in White Plains, right? They're forced to be there all night, standing in front of the bar, right? You know, I think that this conversation really prompted an overall comprehensive way of how we're going to be discussing the economic development portion of the village when it comes to nightlife.
So, if I can answer, because a lot of this speaks to law enforcement, it's concerning that every time there's a concern raised about something, we start talking about how we don't want nightlife now. Now, I've sat before this board for at least 6 other cabaret licenses, or at least 5 other, I'm guessing, and I've been in support of every other one that's come here, except for one, which is the exact same issue, perpetual problems with that establishment. So it's a little concerning that every time we raise that, we go right to the end of, well, I guess we don't want nightlife. And to say that we need a permanent foot post, if you read through the report that we submitted, there's hundreds of entries of cops getting out of their car and walking around in these locations. That doesn't stop fights inside of a bar. So I don't think the concern here is that the cops aren't doing enough to prevent what's going on. I think that what we're recommending is that we found a business where the owner has not operated to the level of responsibility we think that the residents in that area deserve, and we're making a recommendation that the board deny a permit for a cabaret license based on that. This has nothing to do with denying nightlife or trying to stop economic development. And it's concerning that we'd have to bring in White Plains to tell us how to do it, because quite frankly, I work with 59 other professionals that are some of the best in the business. And some of you have gone out and told people that from time to time. So I don't understand how we've gone from a point of we identified a problem, we brought it to the board, we made a recommendation, and now we need to bring in somebody else to tell the police department how to do business.
Can I just interject? To me, what I'm hearing, and I think to me, this is clearly about a very specific license, which is actually the process involved here of getting input. The input, so if you don't agree with the input, even though it's being done in an empirical way, then you don't agree with the input. But the process is, and there's a reason for it. So for me, this is not about cabaret license or the kind of businesses we want or we don't want. It's very specific. We are being asked for very specific about this particular, not even location, because they've been in multiple locations. You know, it's sort of, the process to me makes a lot of sense on behalf of people that live in this community. And it is a smaller village, and I'm glad you said what you did, because I actually find that most of the time you green light these things. And that's why I said last time, it's rare not to green light something, but when they do, then I'm going to go with that process, because I'm not there 24 hours a day, and even if I were there 12 hours a day, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to see it. And frankly, I am not sure why the onus is on the police department to manage what's inside a business, because I've spent lots of time in lots of bars in my lifetime, and the bars that have the appropriate number of employees managing their hours, that they know when they're busy, and they know exactly when people have too much to drink, and they know exactly how much you're serving every single Thursday night and every single Friday, but aren't hiring enough people. It isn't the taxpayer's job to manage it. They're managing the outside. So really, I would like to say to the person who runs this over and over again, you know, maybe since you're doing so well and selling so much booze that people are getting drunk enough, you might want to consider a few more employees, because if I ran a restaurant and it was really busy, I'd hire more staff too. It's not, every business is like that. So I just find this conversation, for a department that generally green lights people, once in a while we get a, you know, I'm a little bit on the fence. But this one's very specific. And it doesn't even matter whether I've ever been there or not. All I'm hearing is that there's a history here, and that is actually why we asked the police department to be involved. So to then sort of get upset with the professionals who are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, you know, I'm not getting it. And I don't think we're hurting a business. It's not the only thing they do. We've had conversation about the hours of the cabaret, which some people on this board have differed on. That's also an issue, is how late, how much do you serve, you know, how many bathrooms should be open. I mean, seriously, there's more involved to this than this sort of 0-1 game here of like, it's all or nothing. This isn't all or nothing. Specific to this history, specific to the professionals that we have hired on behalf of all of our residents. What is that we're doing? I don't think we have to legislate about this. Specific to this one, do we want to allow this to go on based on the information we have? For me, I can't support this kind of history. And I don't believe it's about second chances. I think that there is a real pattern here. There's a real pattern here. So for me, I can't support this.
So, hold on, I'm sorry. You made a couple of statements. I don't think anyone's upset here. I think the question that has been raised several times is, at what point does, you know, history not follow? Now, if we disagree with that notion that history should not follow, or that people should be given a second chance, that I understand, and we can have that disagreement. But I do want to be clear about that. You said there were 400 calls. Over 400?
I don't have the full report in front of me. It was delivered to the board with the application, so you all should have that.
Okay.
We give a few years look back. I believe it's a 5-year look back.
Okay.
Depends on how far back you go. But I also, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Could you do me a favor? Could you, and if you can, could you separate premise checks from like the most like egregious things? Like, can you highlight those things for us? Just because I don't like if it's like.
So, I mean,
like,
I can give you some topics of those, just notes that I've taken on them. I mean, I'll tell you the most recent one: 2 people fighting. Before that, dispute between male and female. Before that, people arguing in the street. Before that, noise complaint. Man acting erratic. Unruly patron removed from tavern. Started trouble outside. Person wanting to hurt themselves. Person attacked in the bathroom. Disorderly male. Noise complaint, lowered the music. Altercation, large crowd broken up. I mean, it's just...
And that's all at this location across the street?
No, because they've only been open for a short
So,
time. So there's a
you know,
handful of them here.
The thing is, we're delving into the details of reports, and I think the reality is 3 people have said we're not going to go against the recommendation of the police. But that's not the end of the conversation. I want to ask the very first thing that was brought up about the licensed premise and whether we have a horseshoe bar, whether we're also serving alcohol in other parts of the building. If you have a license to serve alcohol on a particular premise, doesn't it have to be the entire premise where the alcohol is being served?
Well, you have a liquor license, which is for your location. And we have the liquor license for CRA Tavern, which is, it's a restaurant serving beer, wine, cider, and liquor. So they serve at that location. That's what their license is. It doesn't say a particular room, is what I'm saying. It just says method of operation, restaurant serving beer, wine, cider, and liquor. That's their New York State liquor license.
Okay, then one of the suggestions that have been brought up that's related to this, and I believe Trustee Herrera, you brought it up, is there an opportunity to do a one-day cabaret license or one-day permit? And that's something that I know staff has looked into generally. You don't have anything for us to consider, but is that something that right now at this juncture would be appropriate to discuss? I had sent out an email asking folks if this would be an appropriate time to discuss it, and I know that Stuart and Kevin had looked at it.
Before we go into the prospective application, can we just close off on what's being discussed with Chief? Since I think it's just separate.
No, two separate topics.
Yeah.
Are you seeing it as two separate?
Yeah.
I just want to make
I agree.
one comment, okay? And you know, one of the things that Trustee Bazemore is asking is, I mean, one of the things that I'm looking for is, I'm looking for, you know, some period of time in which we would see an operation that was run appropriately, in which there would be, you know, not a total absence, but there would be an absence of incidents in which the police had to do some of the many things that the chief discussed, and I'm looking for sort of this period of compliance. I mean, you know, future boards will make those decisions down the road. For the moment, I'm not prepared to make that leap because the chief indicated, you know, that he doesn't feel it's appropriate to offer that. But I think it is fair to ask that, you know, what period of compliance, you know, does it take for the chief to get the comfort level, and even board members to get the comfort level that the business is being run appropriately, that a cabaret license is warranted. So I mean, and I think that is a fair question. You know, is it unending? Is it just they should never, as the trustee said, just don't bother? You know, I don't think that's fair either. Okay, so you know, I don't know whether that's a standard that the board decides, or maybe it's something that the chief would be willing to weigh in on. But I think it is a fair question, and it's something that we do need to think about. So I'll just leave it at that.
If the question is from the perspective of the police department, I mean, first I think it's important for everybody to understand that we don't submit a vote on this. So it's up to the board as to what you choose to do. We offer a recommendation. We offer our recommendation based on what we've seen over the course of the past 12 months, keeping in mind the knowledge we have of things that have gone on over a lifetime. So in this particular instance, we haven't seen the volume of complaints there, but the same type of things continue to crop up. And they're things that we don't necessarily see in all of the other locations. So what we're going to continue to do is each year we're going to look at the history for that year and put it in the framework of what we've been doing year after year after year for more than a decade with this business. And that's going to be what our recommendation is. You know, whether the board chooses to tell somebody, I don't think it's within the board's right to tell somebody you could never have a cabaret. I think you have to entertain the application each year as it comes in. But I think that what the police department has to do is give you a recommendation each year, and then it's up to the sitting board to make that decision. Whether our recommendation would change, I mean, I suppose businesses have the opportunity. Other businesses have asked if they could come in and sit down with us. They've gone through SLA training where, at their request, you know, we've done other things to aid other businesses just in making sure that they're in line. Those businesses that ask for our assistance, we offer. And we certainly participate with all those businesses.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but are there 3 members of this board that would like us to put a cabaret license resolution up for approval? Okay, then moving on to the discussion of the one-day cabaret license possibility. What have you found, or what would you recommend us consider?
Chief and I have discussed this, and there are, if you want to call it, day licenses that you have in a number of locations in Westchester. You have New Rochelle has it, and on Long Island you have the Village of Seacliff, and also the City of Albany has it. I think the one thing that we would say is that if it's a one-day license, it doesn't equate to a one-day turnaround from the village's end. Currently, as you know, we require,
It still has to go
obviously,
through.
we require still building department approval, and we require a review from the police department. This board, as the statute is now written, approves cabaret licenses. So if we're going to do that, what may be required is that an applicant may have to give enough lead time to allow police to do what they have to do, building to do what they have to do, and this board to ultimately, get a quorum together to consider and ultimately vote for it. What I can tell you is, for example, in the city of New Rochelle, they issue something called a day license, and it cannot be for more than 3 days in a calendar year. And although it later then says a day license will only be valid for 1 day, so they basically, it's 1 to 3 days is what they've got. Their fee is $105 per day. So, yes.
I may have missed it, I'm sorry. Consecutive days or any 3 days in a year? Or you didn't say?
This one doesn't say. For example, the village of Seacliff, out on Long Island, no more than 3 consecutive days within any 30 days between the effective dates of 2 such licenses. The city of Albany, up to 2 dates in the same calendar year. Could be consecutive, but need not be. And they also, again, have fees. In Seacliff, the temporary license is $100. In the city of Albany, it's, looks like it's $50. And that depends if they're not serving alcohol. It's a little bit more if they are, which is what we have with our cabaret license. So there's no technical problem with doing it if we wanted to do that. It just would still require review by building, review by police, and approval by this board. The board may want to consider that with regard to a 1 day, perhaps it could be a manager sign-off at that point. That's just, I throw that out only from a time perspective, because a lot of times we're going to get these, like as we do with parade permits, with very little lead time to do the inspection. But in terms of actually having it, you can certainly put something into it. Now, I guess my initial thought was that all we would have to do was amend the fee schedule to put something in if what the board wanted to do. However, looking at what New Rochelle has, Seacliff, and Albany, you probably would have to amend our cabaret to specifically provide for the temporary license and the limited period of time that license is, be it 2 consecutive days in any calendar year or something like that. Because we don't have that now, so we don't have that type of license. But there is no reason it can't be done. There are other, as I said, there are other municipalities that have it, others outside of the state that have it. So it can certainly be done, but we would not change the requirements for both building and police to opine as to what's required.
Responses, reactions?
Thank you for looking into it. I hadn't proposed what I was thinking, but it's kind of in the same realm. I thought it was pretty simple as it is, because we're just changing the application, same procurement process, and process that leads up to it when it comes to the review from the police and building department and ultimately the village board. I like the idea of, this came up after a new business on Main Street didn't have a cabaret license when they first opened. They had live music illegally, and I thought that it would have been great if they had an option to apply for a 1 day while they became aware of a cabaret license. They were very new to Main Street. They didn't know, not that they were trying to get in trouble, but more options for businesses. The fee, there's a lot of businesses who don't need a year-round cabaret license. However, if we could sell it to them that it's easier for them and for the village as far as time and resources to get a year one, just in case you want to have live music and you don't know when, and it's more cost effective. Or maybe it's for an establishment that normally would never have any live music, but wants to do so. So thank you, Stuart, and anyone else who looked into it. I appreciate it.
Do you have, it's a great idea. Do you have an idea of, there's a 3 day, there's a 1 day? I hate for a business every time they want to do a 1 day to have to run and get a 1 day a few times a year. Like you have a sense of, you had a specific case, which I get, but do you have a sense of, it should be 3 times? It's also the money. If it's $350 for the whole year and you're
That's what I
charging
mean.
$100, I know, I get you, man.
Yeah.
No, I get it. It's, it's all about strategy and using pricing to say what is it that you want all the people to have. But accessible to them? Is it because, hey, you know, on New Year's, Christmas, July 4th, like a coffee place would like to have music, or Cinco de Mayo, it's a Mexican restaurant, they want to make it a bigger deal, so they want to get, you know, like, so they know in advance the days that they might. But I'm getting a sense from Stuart that he thinks it'll be more like, I need it, I didn't know, and it's tomorrow. Like, I'm getting a different sort of sense from what you think would be a great idea and what you think might be actually. So I'm just trying to understand why we're doing this. And I think it's a good idea, I just don't know the strategy or like what's.
And I'm not sure, you know, because we do sometimes get people who are looking at it at the last minute. We've had that occur. It could well be, though, that someone's saying, I'm planning for a special event on this day.
Yeah.
And clearly, for that, the one-day license makes sense. Because I'll just give you an example. In Seacliff, their normal cabaret fee for a year is $150. Their special fee is $100. It almost pays to get it for the year. Albany and New Rochelle are different because they determine their fee based upon the number of patrons who can fit into the particular venue. So there, you know, their highest fee there is $1,100 for 501 or more people, but their day license is only $105. So, but I should point out that for up to $250 people, it's $225. So that's again.
This is New Rochelle you're talking about, right?
That's New Rochelle.
Yeah, okay. They got a whole row of wedding factories, so.
Yeah, so you got that.
It's true. It's different.
That's worth $1,000 for them.
So, but again, the real question is, you know, for how long you would want it to last? Would you want it for 2 days? Would you want it for?
Honestly, I did not think of it that far. I mean, that's kind of
Again,
where
that's what other
I
places.
kind of want a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a good idea. It's just like,
But I mean, if time's our only question, I mean, is there a particular process and/or what are we going to do with extra time? Like just keep discussing what we. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here.
Yeah.
Should I propose 2 days max? Should I propose?
I was actually thinking 3 days. I like the idea. And the way I'm thinking about it is if you are just thinking about the whole conversation we had earlier about, you know, business licenses and commercial licenses, and I'm just thinking forward that we already have that welcome package, right? If you're a new business, you may say, hey, you know, there are 3 times of the year that I want to have this particular event, and you can market, you can plan, you can try it out because, you know, realistically speaking, you know, then you can decide whether you want to get a whole year. You know, I think oftentimes, you know, one of the reasons that people initially even get cabaret licenses is to try to draw more businesses in. So I think if we did like a 1 day or a 3 day cabaret license sporadically after a year, that would allow businesses to actually think about 3 different times that they can try to draw, you know, people to their establishment, and if they feel that they want to do more, they can jump into their year.
Let me understand the 3-day thing, because when I first heard it, I was thinking it was, you know, if somebody was doing for example, the Jazz Fest. If somebody was going to host the Jazz Festival for 3 days in their location, then they would want it to be up to 3 consecutive days, and that's kind of a one-time approval for up to a 3-day event, for example. And if we just said it's a 1-day event permit, then they wouldn't. It wouldn't be wouldn't be accessible to that kind of an event.
Which is why in New Rochelle and in the places I mentioned, they actually refer to it as simply a special temporary license. So, for example, as I said, in Albany, you can apply for it for up to 2 dates in the same calendar year. So, if a person wants to do 2 consecutive dates, they can. Otherwise, they could do it January 1st and December 31st, for example.
The reason it makes so much sense to me for us to have brought this up tonight, I mean, it was on our agenda last month, and then Debbie was out of town, so we pushed it and, you know, brought it back up tonight because it was sort of related to this, is it's going to go through the same process, the same review process by the building department, by the police department, which is why there would still have to be some fee involved. But it wouldn't have to be as high a fee, because some of the fee for a cabaret license is the inevitable or anticipated additional attention that it may require for village resources if there's additional revelry, let's say. But if it's only going to happen for 1 day or up to 3 days, if it were a maximum event length, then it could be lower, because then you're only talking about needing to cover just wanting to recoup the cost of the investigation and the recommendations. But it seems to me like this could be an opportunity if there is a business that the police have some concerns about and may not be recommending generally. Would there be an expectation that to grant a one-day permit or a short-term permit is perhaps something that would have a de facto, everything's up to the discretion, a de facto somewhat lower threshold for approval?
My conversation with Stuart was that I would be in favor of, it's the board's prerogative, but my recommendation would be that this be relegated to a manager's discretion and just let the manager do it. Notwithstanding, based on our conversation tonight, there may be some disagreement from the board if the police department's got a recommendation that board members won't support. So that would be the risk of leaving it to the manager, because then it's left to one person as opposed to a 5-person board. That said, having some experience with issuing permits over the years now, I know that many people will come in very, very last minute or won't have one, and we can catch them last minute before the event happens and encourage them to put the permit through. If it has to go for resolution, then we're looking at least, at the very least, we're looking at a couple days lead time, if we can even get it on an agenda in time. Could be up to a week or 8 days. So, for a one-day permit where these things oftentimes will be last minute, or it's something that's a relatively small event, sure, we would certainly take a different look at things as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to let this person have live music every Friday and Saturday for the rest of the year, as opposed to saying, look, we have this very specific event. I think then the details of the event come into play, and that makes it a different conversation. But I think if you want to really make things easier on the business owners, leaving this up to the manager would probably be a nice way of streamlining things.
Then if that's the case, and if it's going to potentially function in a way that a business that may not be granted one for the full year, may be granted one for an event, then it's sort of like a trial, and see how it goes. And so it seems that if they want to do an event in April and they go through the process and they get the 1 to 3 day approval, we'll see how it goes. And then the next time they want to do one, it should be another application. So if they want to do one then in September, it would be another application. You could say, hey, how did it go? Okay, you can have another one, and then maybe in a future year there's been some demonstration of an understanding of the best way to manage events in a particular location, so that we don't have to be as concerned about it getting out of hand.
I'm in favor.
So, so then the question.
But not a vote.
So the question you were raising is the way to potentially streamline it, to not have it, because it'll take a few days, at least a week, we should say, for it to go through potentially the building department and the police department to provide your recommendations. Depending on what day of the week it falls, it could take another week before we meet again and are able to approve it. So you're suggesting if we wanted to design it so that it was a manager approval, then she would get the recommendations from the staff and make a determination for the one day, which is different than how we have for the year long.
I do think that there should be something in there, unless it's a really extraordinary circumstance, that application has to be in by 14 days before the event.
like 15,
Because, and the reason is simply, the building department, even with 3 code enforcement officers.
Yes.
They
don't drop everything for an event, yes.
too, so.
Same with the
Yeah.
police. So I think that, and I think we actually, for some of them, have that. On the issue of the fee, as you know now, we have a tiered fee schedule for our cabarets. I would recommend to the board it just be one fee for a temporary. In other words, I don't think it depends on what they're serving, is how we do it now, for 6 months or a year. But I think for the one, I would just set one fee. And wouldn't worry about it in terms of what's being served. Clearly, if they're serving alcohol, they're going to have to demonstrate they have a legitimate liquor license. But otherwise, I would just go with one.
So then, Debbie,
I was just going to ask, so what's the maximum number the same business, not even, I guess, establishment can do in 1 year? Is it once during a year, up to 3 days? Is it twice during a year? I mean, what are we thinking? I don't think it's a legal issue. It's more of a...
I don't know that many people would have a cabaret for 3 consecutive days. My understanding of that would be that when they say 3 days, it means 3 different events throughout the year. We probably can afford to do more than that, but then you get into an economic issue of, are you encouraging people not to get the full year one, which is a little bit more efficient for us? So I think there may be some thought to be put into that.
If there's any similar practice, the SLA has 1 day permits, and I believe you're allowed to get 4 here. I don't know where they came up with that number. That's just the only similar parameters I'm aware of.
I like the temporary license, 3 separate days, or however anyone wants to do it, but like
3 days
in the
within
3
a
days
calendar
in the
But
calendar.
no more in a calendar.
Yeah,
No more than 3.
That's 3. You could do 3 consecutive days or 3 separate days,
Exactly.
2 and 1 or whatever.
exactly.
The,
In a calendar year.
what you don't get from that is if we approve 3 days, any 3 days in the calendar year in January, day 1 doesn't go well, but you still got 2 days you can use any other time of the year without being reviewed again.
No, because
No, to my
say no.
my understanding of all of our licenses is that they're revocable based on certain criteria.
At any
Subject
time.
to revocation.
At any time, yeah. Right, I mean, anytime.
So if they do it in January, they get approval for 3 days. They have to pick the day of what the event is, right? So
I
your
suspect that
office
most
is aware
people-
that the day they selected January 22nd, there's going to be an event. We got our permit for our January 22nd event. You know it's going to happen. You're going to be aware of it. But if they have a permit for 2 other days to just use throughout the year, what's the process for those? Because if part of the goal of this, or one potential application for this, is to allow businesses that may not otherwise be granted a year-long cabaret, for them to be more closely monitored and for us to be more involved in the approval process during the year, then granting 3 days that might be used anytime during the year in January doesn't accomplish that.
We do have provisions currently under our permanent license section to deal with revocation in the event that there is a reason to revoke a license. I would just make one point. I think to portray the one-day license as effectively to do it because there is someone out there who is otherwise a bad actor, but we're sort of giving you a trial run. I don't view that. I view this as someone is having an event. They need a cabaret for 1 day. It seems to me that if it's someone who is otherwise a bad actor, they probably shouldn't be getting they shouldn't get the temporary. I mean, you may still have, now that's still going to be up to, whoever is going to decide. But I think that, the way I'm looking at this is someone who, I've got a special event that night, as Trustee Herrera said, maybe I'm opening a business and, I'm going to do something. This is obviously the board's thought, but it seems to me if it's being looked at as a means of helping the individual or entity which otherwise has a checkered career or checkered background, I don't know that's the direction, or it seems to me that's not the idea of the temporary license. The idea of the temporary license is someone needs it for 1 night, or they need it for 2 nights, or 3 nights in a given year. But their record is otherwise okay. In other words, they've been checked out, the building department says it's fine. Not that in the past we've had these issues. Again, ultimately it's going to be a determination, be it through this board or the village manager. But I think the reasoning behind it should be more that someone is looking for a venue for that night and wants to do it, not that we're, in a sense, dealing with someone's otherwise bad behavior.
And you know what, the vast majority of people who do make the application are going to fall into that category.
Right.
That is really what it's designed for.
Right.
So then my question would just be, if we do decide to go forward with granting up to 3 events per year, does the village in some way get notified when those events are happening? Otherwise, we won't really know when 3 have passed, and we won't
I think
particularly be
that
aware
you
of it.
give 1 per event. And if your event is 3 days, then you get 1 for the year for 3 days and you're done. But if you do 1 in January and 1 in June and 1 in September, that's 3 different permits.
Correct.
That's how I envisioned it, yeah.
Okay, and you can do up to 3 a year.
I think that's
For the
what
same
we-
price, or is it?
Oh,
It would be a new application, a new fee as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
you guys can come up with the fees. I don't think we need to,
I assume that, you're going to come up with the fee based
Yeah,
on, we
just-
want to recoup our costs for the staff going through the review process and offering the recommendations, so.
and I think we're agreeing that the manager will manage us and not go through the board.
Are we?
Is that what we're agreeing to? Because that's what I'm hearing.
That was proposed. I don't know about that yet. I don't know how I feel about that yet. But
Okay.
it could be on the table. As far as intention, we never got into intention because I didn't know that a conversation was had before the meeting. But my intention of this proposed policy was for those general people who were having general events. but also to reignite the conversation of second chances and, obviously, coming off of the back of the Parisi conversation, right, on Cortland Avenue, because second chances will be discussed on this board as when it comes to procurement and policy and permitting and operation. So, I want that conversation to keep on going as far as how we operate. So that's the intention that was being proposed here tonight.
Great. So, is there any reason to hold off on this? This isn't really a code enforcement thing, so as you're able to come up with a draft for
I
us?
can have something to present to you because it would require an amendment to the code
Right.
to provide for those licenses and for these for village manager approval. So I can have something for the board to look at.
So tentatively for maybe the June 27th?
That would be fine.
So wait, we are moving with, if we do this, the village manager is gonna be the sign-off person?
Well, I can
It's-
have
well,
that in
that's
there.
what
and
Omar
that can
said
still
he
be a
wants
matter
to
of
We'll
the board.
discuss
discuss
again
it.
next
Okay,
month,
okay,
yeah.
I'll put it in there and we'll
And
call
then
it as
we
a
can say
placeholder.
yes
and
or
we
no
can
to
do
that.
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking?
Oh.
And 14 days, was that an agreement, or that wasn't? Or is that based on who's
I think that was
managing?
based
I
on
think,
recommendation.
it seems like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
that-
yeah.
Nobody,
That's fine.
that seemed
Yeah,
logical,
yeah.
yeah.
That-
Okay, so SCARS,
Yes, thank you, Chief.
thank you very much, Chief Sylvester. Good evening.
There are three small claim assessment review matters. The total amount to be paid out is $2,179.60. They involve three properties, 119 Cedar, 9 Birch, and 11 Birch. I'd just like to be able to present a resolution to the board on June the 6th, approving these three settlements, which are subject to a stipulation, so that the refund amounts can be paid out to the three homeowners. But again, the total amount is $2,179.60, and broken down $1,205.35 for 119 Cedar, $225.66 for 9 Birch, and $748.59 for 11 Birch. So there was a slight drop in the assessments for those three properties, and they filed their SCAR petition, SCAR being Small Claims Assessment Review. This was the stipulation of settlement that was agreed to, and just want to get the board okay so that we can have the checks issued by the Finance Department
So that'll be on a resolution that's on for us.
for the 6th of June, correct?
That's fine. And as I recall, Birch Court was one of the neighborhoods that was hit pretty hard in last year's, the reval, yeah. I think they had a 15% increase, so.
So these two
It's not surprising, we had a couple of properties in that neighborhood that, that
Right.
filed a claim and, you know,
Right, they-
just
they-
them for getting a couple $100 back.
Yeah, both saw a percentage reduction at those two adjoining houses, 9 and 11.
Understandable. Okay. Sounds good. Anything further?
Yep, we have continuing business.
We do? Yep. We don't have continuing business.
I sent out a memo earlier, and I think,
Oh, yes, you're right. I completely forgot. It's not on the agenda and I forgot about affordable housing policy.
yes.
Thank you.
All right. Guess I'm starting this off?
No, Stuart's
Oh,
great.
okay.
Just to bring the board up to date in terms of, and Trustee Bazemore, I will turn the mic over to you. The draft has been sent to Commissioner Drummond. She has been busy with the CDBG, going to all the municipalities in Westchester, because those papers are due, I think, on the 1st. So she did acknowledge receipt. She basically said she would get back to me after she finishes her cross-county trek, so to speak. And so I'm waiting to hear back from her with regard to any comments that she has on Local Law 3. I will follow up with her probably the middle part of next week, because again, June 1st is when everything is in. And just so the board is aware, this village has already submitted all the documents to Commissioner Drummond's office, except for the one that came tonight, but the other documents are all there and are prepared to go forward. So with that, I am ready to proceed.
All right. I sent an email earlier in the week.
Got them from you, right. You had I have two questions. The first you wrote was, in one section it says the density bonus is 10% of market rate. In section F it says 1-to-1 ratio, and which one is it? I know that the plan was that the density would be 10% of market rate. I think the one-to-one dealt with something different in terms of how we were calculating it, but the plan is that it's 10% of market rate. That's what we were thinking of, but I will, let me just look to see where we are. Cancel. Well, my understanding, when this was drafted, it was to be that the density would be 10% of the market rate units that are being constructed. So I'm going to look at the section F that you referenced there, Trustee Bazemore, and I'm looking at that here, and I don't want it to be confusing if it requires a change that it is to be that the density units to be created are based upon a 10% of the market rate units that are being proposed. So if that needs to be revised in here, that will be revised.
All right, I think, you know, we've talked about the density rate at length, and again, it's been my understanding just from earlier conversations that we were asking for a 20% set aside, and that it was going to be a 20% bonus density. And I believe at the earlier meeting it was mentioned, and that was mentioned. So I just want to make sure that we're clear, because I feel like that's why we had a lot of the conversations going back and forth about character of the neighborhoods, is because there was a concern that with increased density, you know, buildings would become higher. And that would be a concern, logically speaking, if we're asking for a 20% set aside with a 20% bonus density. And that has always been the understanding from at least previous conversations, and that's why I asked for clarification, because it would be, if you look at the current law is a 10% set aside with a 10% bonus density, and I believe the reason that the village did that over 10 years ago, having this policy go back to 2006, was because bonus density was something that you could offer to mitigate the cost of having and asking for affordable housing.
It was an incentive, to my understanding.
It's an
The first
incentive.
policy.
Absolutely.
It was
Yeah.
a required incentive.
Yes, Mayor Garrity.
It's not an incentive. It helps offset the cost because they can have that many more units.
Absolutely.
It's
So
an offset.
it's an offset. It is, and I can speak to why you would do that, right? Like it's your man. You know, we clearly could say, hey, you know what, 20%, you're not getting anything. That's what it is, right? But I think at least the idea of the previous board and probably the previous planner was that you wanted some flexibility. And throughout this law, we actually see, even though we're mandating, we're seeing some flexibility, and that's what we've seen. The next point I wanted to raise was, I guess this section 4.
Just go back to what you.
Okay.
I want to be clear so
Okay.
that I'm not making a mistake here. The density bonus is to be 10%.
No,
You want it to be 20%.
20. That
So
is
you want, so in other words, in addition to the 20% set aside, so essentially it's a 20-20.
yes.
Okay,
It's
I
'cause
want to,
it-
is
yes.
that the sense of the, okay, I just want,
That was my understanding from
Okay,
our previous
I apologize,
conversation,
you know-
but it did not make it into writing, and I didn't pick up on it before, and had, so.
So I will-
But I do want to say, we put this out for the public comment on June 6th meeting, and it said 2010, 20% set aside with a 10% bonus density. But we're not voting on
No,
anything.
no, this
It's
is-
current standard. So we can, before we vote on anything, we can make these changes. So it can be 20%, but I had that same understanding.
this
that
can
you did.
clearly be changed and when it's put up on our website. So there's,
My suggestion would be, we've put it out to the public, we call for the public hearing, we put it on the website, right, for people when we call.
It's there now.
Let's leave it as it is, because I have a feeling there'll be more, adjustments that we'll want to make, because there's
Okay.
a few other things that are going to
I
come.
mean, if we're making adjustments now, I would prefer, because we're just getting clarification, because we thought that this was what we were discussing, and because it's not technically on paper, I would rather it be uploaded and changed so that, so that people know what we're talking about, because we've had 3 drafts, and I don't know if all 3 were updated or uploaded at the same time, and if you follow our conversations, you would know that we've looked at 3 different drafts of the same legislation. So I just want to, just for the,
What were the other items? Because you were asked a couple other things. Right.
yeah, the most update, exactly.
The other ones I have copy of.
Okay,
Helpful if I put the other. No, no.
all right,
I just. Thank you. Thank you.
all right, the other one was,
So
okay.
again, am I,
20, yes.
Let him finish through his
Okay.
list, and then we'll see if there's changes that we want to make at this
go
time.
ahead,
Okay.
sure.
There was, it's section 4, number 3. And I'll give you some time because it's,
Section 4, number, I've got it for
yeah,
you.
okay, great. It speaks about the planning board, being able to,
Right.
yeah, it was my understanding early conversations that we wanted to keep it just 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, or whatever the development that was being had, like whatever their
Same
there's
proportions.
the same proportions. It was just my understanding, and so I just want to make sure that because we worked kind of clear on that in our earlier conversations. So I don't really want the planning board making decisions. Not so much that I have the fact is, in the legislation it says, that they will make decisions according to the needs of the village. I don't know what mechanisms we have for the planning board to determine what the current needs of the village is at the time. So I would rather to make it very simple, very clear that when a developer is proposing a project, that the affordables will just be evenly distributed among the units.
So remove the clause that starts with unless a different proportion is
Yes,
approved.
yes.
I see. If that's, I can certainly take that out. It was done, just so the explanation is, it was done because if the planning board thought that there should be more 2s, let's just say, and the percentage might have been, let's say, 15% 1s and whatever, but they thought there should be more 2s, that would allow, but I'm up, whatever you folks want, obviously,
Yeah.
that's what, but if you want that, sure, I see where you're talking about.
And then, and I think I also raised this in an email. Kevin Dorka, he had, of course, a series of recommendations that we have vastly talked about over and over again. But the recommendation was for 4 more units and not 6 or more units. And so I know that on January 10th, that was the scope in which we began our conversation. I have no issue with 4 more units. I don't know if the board, if 4 or 6 makes a difference. But I just wanted to raise that.
If I could just add a little bit to that thought. We talked about that internally.
Okay.
And there is an administrative burden on the person that owns the property to do all of the work that it takes for the affordable unit to be classified as affordable.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that you want to put that burden on someone that only has 4 units,
Okay.
because that's a lot of work for somebody to go through for just 1 unit.
Gotcha. Okay. That
So-
thank you. And then section F part 2.
Section 2 or?
No, section F part D number 2. I'm sorry.
Section, give me this just a second. Section F, okay, what you got? Just give me the other stuff, trustee.
So, I guess the addition of density bonus or additional density bonus unit count to a residential development involved in the subdivision or a 2-family dwelling. I guess my general question is if there's already an existing 3-family, 4-family, 6-family, in a 2-family district, is that clause saying that if it's rehabbed or if someone decides to knock it down, that they're not able to participate in the bonus density? I just wanted to understand what that clause actually means.
Let me, and I apologize, because I want to see exactly what the clause is. So just tell me again, because I have so many subsections and subletters that I sort of get confused.
Yes, Section F,
Okay.
Part D, number 2.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman.
Oh, now oh, Jesus. My computer died.
Is this what says applicants are eligible for, no, that's the parking one. Let me just see where you are. Let me-
Oh, no, my computer just died.
Died? Okay. So,
It's not that many pages, we'll be patient.
No.
okay, folks.
Recess, you go home, get your charger.
I- The thought was that certainly with if someone were to knock the building down and wanted to rebuild, they should be subject to the affordable housing because it's new construction
Okay.
at that point. If it was, now, if they were, let's just say it this way, if they had a building that was essentially let's say it's in the PO zone and they wanted to go from a 4 to a 6. That 6 then puts them into the situation where they'd have to have affordable
Okay.
because they're then at 6 units. Because, obviously if it's in a T zone, they can only be a 1 or a 2, unless it's one of the other special types of uses, which we're not talking about. But if we're in a zone that would allow, like, I think the PO zone allows that, something like that. Obviously, in the multifamily zone, we allow that. But if it's new construction, you're contemplating 6 or more, you're going to be covered by it. This would be, you're not exempted out from this. I want to look at the language, but even if you're doing work and you're looking to go above 6 units, in other words, let's say you're at 4 and you're going up to 6 for some reason, or let's say it this way, the building department finds that he's got illegal units in there, but he wants to legalize it, and he's in a zone where he could legalize it. If it's above 6, he should basically be subject to the affordable housing at that point, because it would seem to me because he's above 6. I'll read it to just make sure.
Yeah. We can.
But I don't. The intention was not that if it's greater than 6 for some reason that person should be exempted out. If someone is at 6 units now and they've constructed, or even in the past, they should have been subjected to the affordable housing, unless of course they are from before the time we had affordable housing. If this is from pre-Article 62, I don't believe that those are all subjected to the affordable because it's basically with new construction is what we're looking at. But if it's similar to, in a sense, like what they do with ETPA, the units that get exempted are the ones that basically have undergone the major renovations. If it's a simple renovation, they don't get covered, but if it's a major renovation, they would be exempted. Here, if it's a major renovation, they should basically be covered because they're making those kind of changes. But I'll read it to make sure
Because
it's clear on
I just wanted to understand because
I'll be happy to, sure.
Yeah, I know within our 2-family zones, you're not even allowed to build a 2-family house, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't somehow not allowing or just trying to remove those 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 family units that are already in those, that are already pre-existing. And if someone wanted to actually say, hey, you know what, rehabbing is really, the cost of rehabbing is not worth it, and I might want to do some new construction. I just wanted to make sure that we were giving those kind of bonus densities if they felt that was something that could, I just wanted to understand the statute. I didn't really.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
I just want to correct one thing. In a T zone, if it's an empty lot, you can build a 2.
Okay.
What you can't do is make a 1 into a 2 without a special use permit.
Okay.
But if it's because Chairman Clark tells this to people all the time, that basically if you're in a T zone with an empty lot, you can put a 2 up now. There's no prohibition. The reason you have to go to the planning board is that most of the applications you get in the T-zones are one family, single, where they want to make it a two.
Gotcha.
That requires the special use permit because it's just an anomaly of that particular zone.
All right, and I just wanted to, just for the purposes of the public, you know, we talk about inclusionary zoning. I don't know if we've truly explained why we do policies like this. So I just for the public, inclusionary zoning is an affordable housing tool that links production of affordable housing to market rate housing. Many programs provide cost offsets to developers, such as density bonuses, that allows developers to build more units than conventional zoning. Inclusionary zoning policies require less direct public subsidy than traditional affordable housing programs. Inclusionary zoning programs that require market rate and affordable and market rate units to be located in the same development promote economic development and racial integration. Inclusionary zoning policies that provide meaningful, achievable density bonuses or other benefits. Other benefits offer less offset profit losses because of the affordable housing and compensate. Benefits include in is allowable density, fast track permitting, and reducing parking permits. So when you start seeing some of those things that are actually in our inclusionary zoning, because we had a whole conversation about like reduced parking requirements, these are some of the things that you may see in policies because for people who actually study housing and housing development, they've known that that parking can sometimes inhibit the production of housing, and that's why oftentimes our previous planner had always mentioned about, particularly when it comes to transit-oriented development, that you would reduce the parking requirements because what you're really trying to encourage is, you know, more people walking, and there are different modes of transportation. And then there were some questions that were asked by our planning board and other members of our community, and I just had a couple of answers. As far as why the policy is being recommended, you know, whether it be 4 more units at 20% or at 60% of the AMI, Kevin Dorka, as far as hard data, like that is what I would consider hard data because he actually did an analysis of housing based on the data that was available. So if you look at the study, you will see that only 11% of persons in the 80% AMI are rent burden versus the 41% at 60% AMI. So us changing that policy is allowing us to actually capture more people who are rent burdened than at an 80% AMI level. Are there any benefits? The goal of this policy starting back in November is that we decided we've thought about this policy. We said, okay, we're doing 20%. We're going to offer more density. We do have a flexible policy. So in the case that a developer does not want to put all 20%, that he can opt out. And this is actually something we need to discuss. And hopefully by the end of this policy, we can do this. I would like to legislate or incorporate what the Affordable Housing Fund is to be used for. Because the idea of the idea on this board has been that we would actually take those funds to actually reach people at a lower AMI. And back to the point of the study, what you will see is that 85% of people making between, I believe, $30,000 and $50,000 are rent burden. So that is the logic of the policy, that if we have these funds, that we would use that, whether it to be acquire land or rehab properties, or and there are different sorts of things we can talk about that. So that was the idea, because if we're getting funds, then we can actually address some of those residents and provide safe, affordable places for some of those residents. that our code enforcer, our code director spoke about earlier. I mean, you know, even in the larger buildings when we're having the lower AMIs, the 30s and 40s, it's the hope that we can provide, you know, housing for people at the lower economic spectrum, so that we won't want, fortunately, babies in closets. And also the affordable housing policy is flexible because there is an opt-out fee. And when we look at inclusionary zoning policies, we see opt-out fees. So if it is truly burdensome, if you know, there is a fee that you pay, and because we require that affordable housing is permanently, right, that fee is far cheaper than the cost that you would have to pay per year for the life of the project. And what else? Has the program been successful? That's a simple question. I mean, simple answer. Every affordable unit is occupied, and the in this particular program, developers have been able to absorb and in demand. And, are there some issues? I mean, there are some issues. From what I can hear, this is what I'll say from my understanding with people who are in our affordable housing programs, and this is not because I worked for them, but the ones that are managed by our vendor, typically they do a better job as far as placing tenants, making sure that the unit is affordable. I have heard concerns about the people who may not choose to qualify the residents as our outside vendor, because those residents they feel that they're being qualified for units that may not necessarily be affordable, because those other units, you know, they require that you pay a list of fees. And so I don't know exactly how they qualify their residents. What skin does the game, what skin does the village have? Well, I would say we do, you know, particularly in this policy and in the history of the policy, we have offered those incentives. But I would also say that the greatest skin in the game comes with the properties that we actually own. I mean, those are the opportunities, if we actually want to develop some of the properties that we have, that we can have the greatest skin in the game, because it's not private, it's public. And lastly, should we deal with affordable housing or rehabbing? We should do it all. Actually, we should look at we should be encouraging rehabilitation, which we have community partners that actually do a great job of rehabbing buildings, but we should also be looking at increasing affordable housing. We should also be looking at, you know, hopefully with passive houses, if we ever have that conversation, is what does the next kind of housing look like in the village, as we can even offer affordability but being environmentally sound, and really offering housing that actually is better for the environment and reduces the costs. So that was I just wanted to be able to answer those things, because those are some of the questions that were raised.
I do not.
Well, I will say, Trustee Bazemore, thank you for those very inspiring words, and thank you for addressing some of the questions that were raised directly by the Planning and Zoning Board that we hadn't particularly responded to. And there is a lot of information in the Housing Needs Assessment that speaks to some of the questions about, is there a need, have we demonstrated that there's a need for it, and what the benefits would be. And I very much appreciated some of your comments about ensuring that whatever affordable housing policy, how it looks in the end, that it is meaningful and achievable for our community. And if we go back to the particular items that you were talking about, the 20% bonus density, including that, to me, that is an update that we probably want to make on the website, only because I know we have discussed it at length, and the board did have agreement that that's what we should be including there, just hadn't made it into the written version.
That can be done.
The other items was the 4 and the 6, and then the other one was a little bit.
Well, the other one was to remove the reference to the planning board with regard to
That was it.
Unit numbers, and that, you know, if I'm making a change on one.
I don't remember if we had it, particularly if we discussed that at length, if there is any sort of agreement among the board on that. It's not something I feel strongly about, but if you still feel strongly about it, it's not a change that I think is going to.
Mirror what you want the percentages to mirror what the.
No,
Oh,
we're
to the
talking about
second
the
point,
proportions of the units.
Yeah, the second point, I recall a conversation where we kind of walked around, and I said, and there was clear consensus about making sure that the units would be evenly distributed.
Which is what they currently are. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just,
Right.
it's just provided an out to the.
Yeah.
This was, the question was, did we want to allow for the planning board to have discretion at some point in the approval process? The thinking was that if the village has demonstrated we have a particular need in the 2 and 3 bedrooms, that they could skew it to the 2 and 3 bedrooms. I think some of the concern might be where you introduce discretion, who's going to be the more powerful negotiator at the table, and if it's going to be the developer, then that's not to the advantage of the affordable housing program. So if we just take out the discretion, then it's just proportionate, and that's probably where it's going to end up most of the time anyway. Is that your thinking? That was what came to my mind.
Yeah, and my thing is like, again, we don't have a way to let the planning board know what the current need is. Like that's just not.
Well, it's not institutionalized.
You know what
We
I mean?
could, on different particular boards, do
Yeah.
particular staff, particular.
So I just recall us being, we were at a point in the meeting where it was like, let's just keep it simple, and there was enough there. So I would rather.
And that's consistent with how we have it now,
Exactly.
right there. If those are the two changes we're talking about making, I don't think that's really gonna, if anything, it would be helpful for the public to have that if they're reviewing it in the next couple of weeks as opposed to last week. And if they reviewed it last week and they come back and say 10%, we'll say, no, it's actually 20%. Okay. All right. Any other, we're all a little tired now. Okay. Then in that case, are we okay with motion to adjourn?
No.
No?
Wait.
Oh, good Lord. Was there something else on the list?
Update on ETPA.
Oh.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Everybody's paying attention here. I'm glad. I need to drink more coffee
Okay,
before we
this will
meet.
be very quick, very
Okay.
quick. I wanted to let you know that the contract with our consultant, Collective for Community, Culture, and Environment has been signed, and we actually met with them today. So they will be getting their staff together. We gave them this list, and they are going to be mapping it and doing some other research, and then the school, they hire students to come. They also have their own adults that come with them. I mean, I didn't mean adults.
When you say students, you're not talking about high school students. You're
No,
talking
I'm
about.
sorry. I'm talking
Pratt
about
Institute.
Pratt Institute students.
Our
They
adults.
have someone with them to oversee what they're doing and where they're going. I'm tired.
Yeah, got it.
It's
Got
okay.
it.
It's
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
It's all right.
I have so many questions, but I don't want to ask them now because
Anyway.
I'll screw it up.
So the
we
students
just
are
wanted-
finishing their theses
They are,
at the end of this month.
and
Excellent.
so they probably won't be out until June 1st, but it is moving along, and we had a great conversation. I think that the company's going to do a really good job for us. So it's in 2 months. They still are saying that they would like to get it done and out, and so that's great because they have other projects.
So do we. So yes, so great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, motion to adjourn. We don't need any exec, right? We're good. We did our exec. We're done. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Next week is a fifth Wednesday. We'll miss you. We'll see you at the Birdsall Fagan Police Court facility on Spring Street on June 6th when we will have the public hearing on this affordable housing policy that we were just discussing. This meeting is adjourned.